Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Clare Bernal. Clare Bernal was born on August 18, 1983, in Groombridge, a small village located on the border of Kent and East Sussex in England. She spent most of her childhood and teenage years there. Her mother, Patricia Bernal, raised her, while her biological father, who was divorced from her mother, not caring at all about her life or happiness. Growing up, Clare was a friendly and outgoing person who easily connected with others. She had many friends and was well liked by everyone. At the same time, she also was cautious and careful, avoiding bad habits and choosing her social circle wisely. She attended St. Gregory's Catholic School, where she excelled academically and developed an interest in fine arts and dance. She later earned a bachelor's degree in science from private Kent College. As a teenager, Clare had a solid grasp of cosmetics. During her student years, she worked part-time as a makeup artist. This experience inspired her to pursue a career in the field. She completed specialized courses in cosmetology and makeup artistry, including training in theatrical makeup. Clare's skills and knowledge landed her a dream job as a beauty and style consultant at the prestigious Knightsbridge store in Harvey Nichols. This job gives Clare a pretty good salary. She also relocated to London, living together in the same apartment with two friends to share the high cost of living in the capital. Clare earned her colleagues' respect and even took on a mentorship role for new employees, sharing her expertise in decorative cosmetics and skin care. She was known for being a consummate professional, detail-oriented, patient, and kind-hearted. Embracing life in London, Clare seized every opportunity to hone her talents, acquire new skills, and fully immerse herself in her new life. During her initial months at Harvey Nichols, she met Michael Pech, a senior security guard who appeared to be immediately smitten with her. He was physically attractive and initially tried to attract her attention in a subtle way. However, Michael had a troubled past. A dual citizen of the Czech Republic and Slovakia, he having deserted the army in his home country and fleeing to the UK to avoid responsibility. He was also in the process of a divorce and showed no interest in his young child. Despite his complicated history, Michael's charm won Clare over. For a month, they exchanged sweet nothings, only seeing each other at work. But then, when Michael asked Clare out on a date, she accepted. Unbeknownst to her, this decision ultimately took her life. Their first date encounter occurred at a quaint London coffee shop, where they spent the evening engaged in conversation, sharing stories about their lives. During this meeting, Michael revealed to Clare that he was married, but expressed his intention to divorce his wife as soon as possible, as he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. Although this things made Clare uncomfortable, she initially dismissed it, thinking he must be joking. When Clare shared the story with her mother, Patricia, her mother also found it unusual. Because Clare's suitor was not only a foreigner but also 8 years older and already married. She advised Clare to avoid meeting with Michael again, but she reassured her mother that everything was okay. On the second date, Michael took Clare to an amusement park, gave her a beautiful bouquet of flowers, and showered her with compliments. He kissed her and expressed his love. However, Clare was unsure if Michael was being genuine or joking. She later talked to her mother, who advised her to stop seeing him. Although Clare agreed that Michael's behavior was unusual, she liked him and wanted to get to know him better. A week later, Michael asked Clare out on another date, and she agreed. However, this time he was overly persistent and possessive, confessing his love and telling Clare that he would never let her go. Clare felt not only confused and discouraged but also frightened. She decided that this would be their last date and that she would end their relationship. In total, they had only 3 dates, and their affair lasted less than a month. Despite this short time together, but Michael became overly possessive, believing Clare belonged to him. From that moment on, Clare's life turned into a nightmare. Soon, Michael took a trip to the Czech Republic, intending to meet with his wife and finalize their divorce. However, he failed to do so. During his absence, Clare managed to erase him to the back of her mind, resuming her normal life and convincing herself that Michael was a thing of the past. That changed when Michael called Clare one evening and asked her to meet him at the airport. At first, Clare said no, but Michael made her feel guilty, saying he really needed her help. So, Clare agreed to meet him, and also offered to let him stay with her for a day because he said he had nowhere to go, having moved out of his old apartment and unable to move into his new one yet. But as soon as Michael set foot in her home, he revealed his true intentions. He wanted to live with her from now on. Clare was terrified and ordered him to leave immediately, but he refused. The situation has become stressful to the point where Clare and her neighbors threatened to call the police if Michael didn't leave. He eventually left the apartment, but he remained sitting on the corridor until morning. The next day, at work, Clare attempted to end things with Michael, explaining that their 3 dates hadn't meant much to her. However, Michael refused to listen and instead asked for another chance to correct the mistake and prove his feelings. He showed up with a large bouquet of scarlet roses and walked Clare home, despite her refusal to accept the flowers. That night, Michael sat on the doorstep of Clare's apartment, refusing to leave even when a neighbor tried to intervene. He becomes aggressive, making a chilling threat. It would be easier for him to kill Clare than to let her go. His behavior and crazed look made it clear that he was serious. Although Michael claims to love Clare very much, his behavior suggests that he wants to control her. Clare tried to remain calm and reason with him, explaining that she had no feelings for him and regretted going on the dates. However, Michael responded by hugging her tightly and whispering that she loved him, but she just didn't realize it yet. He then attempted to kiss her, but Clare managed to break free from his grasp. The following months were incredibly difficult for Clare. She confided in her mother, revealed that she felt nervous and scared, knowing what to expect. She felt like she was about to have a nervous breakdown. At work, Michael would repeatedly walk past her store, staring at Clare throughout the day. He bombarded her with dozens of phone calls and sent up to 50 messages daily. In these messages, he confessing his love, pleading for forgiveness, and begging her to take him back, then making explicit threats, insisting that they would eventually be together again. Clare had changed her phone number multiple times, but Michael consistently managed to obtain her new number within a couple of days. What's more concerning was that he knew her home address and frequently staked out her house. At one point, Clare attempted to move to a new residence to escape the harassment, but Michael secretly followed her after work and discovered her new address. Michael seemed to believe that he and Clare were still in a relationship. He counts how many months have passed since their first meeting, first date, first kiss, and suggested celebrating these milestones. His messages often contained threatening language, stating that if Clare wasn't with him, she wouldn't be with anyone else, and that he would ensure it. Clare's mental and physical health suffered greatly due to the harassment. She was crying daily, and found it difficult to concentrate on her job. Her fear grew to the point where she was afraid to leave her home. Every phone call made her jump, and nightmares plagued her at night. Clare's health issues led to significant weight loss, a disheveled appearance, and a loss of her former confidence and vitality. Eventually, Clare's mother, friends, and colleagues convinced her to report the harassment to the police, and she finally agreed to take. To address the situation, Clare initially came to meet the head of security at the mall where she worked. As a former police officer, he took her complaints seriously and began investigating. He spoke with other employees and reviewed numerous surveillance videos, becoming convinced that Michael was indeed stalking Clare. In an attempt to resolve the issue, the head of security reassigned Michael to a different floor and a distant area of the mall. However, this measure had little effect, and Michael's behavior persisted. Michael spent most of his time outside the Knightsbridge store, watching Clare. Eventually, the department store management felt compelled to terminate his employment due to his failure to fulfill his duties. Despite this, the harassment persisted, and Clare decided to involve the police, despite Michael's threats. When questioned, Michael vehemently denied any wrongdoing, claiming his intentions were pure and that he only wanted to rekindle their relationship. Michael asserted that his words may have been misinterpreted due to his accent, and that he never threatened her. The police heard Clare's account of the events, but they failed to consult with her colleagues and roommates who had directly witnessed the incidents. These witnesses could have confirmed that Michael had been stalking Clare for months and had made multiple threats against her life. However, the police consider the situation is no serious. As a result, Michael received only a minor fine and a warning, and was banned from the shopping center where Clare worked and from approaching her. However, just one day after being questioned and informed of the ban, Michael returned to Clare's house and was seen peering intently through her windows. Then, Clare contacted the police upon seeing him, but he had left by the time they arrived. On June 10, 2005, Clare reported Michael's harassment and violation of the restraining order to the police again. However, he disappeared before the officers arrived, and they showed negligence in not pursuing the matter further. It wasn't until the third incident that Michael was finally arrested. He offered no resistance and remained calm, allowing himself to be handcuffed. He was charged with stalking and harassment, spent a week in jail, and was released on bail. His trial was set for August 31, 2005. Before the trial, Clare decided to take a break and went on vacation with her mother and a friend to a popular Italian resort. They enjoyed the warm weather and relaxing atmosphere, and Clare begins to think her nightmare is over. Upon returning to London, she was relieved to find that Michael was no longer following her. Unbeknownst to her, this was not the end of her torment. Meanwhile, Michael returned to his home country, where he spent time at shooting ranges, improving his marksmanship skills and obtaining a permit to purchase a pistol. After smuggling the gun into the UK, he made no attempt to contact Clare before their scheduled court appearance. During the hearing, Michael remained calm, pleaded guilty, and apologized, claiming he had no intention of causing harm. Despite this, he was released once again without receiving any punishment. The following 2 weeks were uneventful, and Clare finally believed it was all over and Michael would leave her alone. Michael, a former senior security guard, utilized his knowledge of the building's layout to enter undetected. He suddenly appeared behind Clare, catching her partner off guard. Before she could react, a shot was fired. Michael shot Clare in the back of the head at close range, followed by 3 more shots to her face. The gunshots triggered chaos in the store, with people screaming, running, and hiding. However, instead of targeting customers, Michael fired 1 more shot into the ceiling and then ended his own life by shooting himself in the temple. Clare, whom he had stalked and manipulated for almost a year, was dead, and he had chosen not to live without her. When medical and the police arrived, then everything was too late. The aftermath was devastating for Patricia Bernal, Clare's mother. Returning home late from her sister's birthday party, she was met with the sight of police at her front door. Upon learning of Clare's death, Patricia's first reaction was to ask if Michael was responsible. Overcome with emotion, she covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. Reflecting on that night, Patricia remembered not having any premonitions or feelings of unease. She had always believed that she would be able to sense if Clare was in danger and protect her, but that wasn't the case. The examination revealed that Michael was under the influence by addictive substances when the crime occurred. Furthermore, a few months prior to the tragedy, Michael had consulted with a department store employee who was also a law student at a prestigious London university. He inquired about the punishment for the crime and the circumstances that could be considered mitigating factors. Claire and other colleagues became aware of this conversation, which frightened Claire. She reported her concerns to the police, said them that Michael might be planning to harm her. However, the police officers took no action in response to her warning. The crime were largely due to the negligence of law enforcement. Despite Claire's repeated requests for help and protection over nearly a year, but the police failed to grasp the severity of the situation. Michael was arrested twice, but then yet released on minimal bail. He ignored a court-ordered restraining order, openly threatened Claire. He even consulted a lawyer about punishment if a crime happens, but the police still felt this was not enough to arrest him in jail. Michael was able to leave the country, acquire firearms, and return to carry out his deadly plan without any obstacles. Meanwhile, crucial witnesses, including colleagues and roommates who personally heard Michael threatening Claire, were never questioned by the authorities during this time. It wasn't until Michael killed Claire and then himself that law enforcement finally realized the gravity of the situation and the numerous mistakes they had made. Claire's mom, Patricia, took action to seek justice. She collaborated with other families who had experienced similar losses. Together, they initiated a nationwide program to support stalking victims. As a result of their efforts, stalking was reclassified as a serious offense under the law. By 2012, a new law had been enacted that prohibited stalking entirely. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nadine Lott. Nadine Lott was born in the late 1980s in Arlo, a town on Ireland's southeastern coast. She was the eldest child of Clare and David Lott. She has 3 younger siblings, Phoebe, Tanith, and Kayla. By the summer of 2012, Nadine, 26 years old, had grown into a charismatic woman. She was eagerly planning a trip to Australia, looking forward to a vacation filled with exciting experiences, sports, and new friendships. Nadine stood out from her peers with her bright smile and charming personality, which drew people to her. She had a large social circle and could easily connect with anyone. However, beneath her outgoing exterior, Nadine was a sensitive and vulnerable person who always tried to see the best in others. She cherished her family, who had loved and supported her throughout her childhood. Nadine discovered a passion for photography, capturing life's fleeting moments to preserve the world's beauty. This hobby eventually turned into a career, and she became a successful beautician, helping others enhance their natural beauty. Nadine experienced some difficulties in her personal life. She wasn't eager to settle into a serious relationship, preferring to enjoy her independence and spend time with friends. This desire for freedom led her to take a trip to Australia, where she was attracted by the warm climate, stunning beaches, and exotic landscapes, finding everything fresh and romantic. Nadine met Daniel Murtaugh in Australia, and it was as if they were polar opposites. While Nadine was outgoing and lively, Daniel was quiet and reserved, with piercing eyes and a toned physique that immediately caught her attention. Despite their differences, they felt an instant and inexplicable connection, sharing common interests and a deep sense of intimacy. As they spent more time together, their days were filled with unforgettable experiences and memories. They strolled along stunning beaches, explored the crystal-clear waters, and shared their deepest dreams and secrets. Nadine was captivated by Daniel's surfing skills, and he was drawn to her carefree spirit, genuine nature, and infectious laughter. Their connection grew stronger with each passing day, unencumbered by any barriers or reservations. Daniel, a few years Nadine's senior, hailed from Dayan, a suburb of Dublin, where he worked as a window fitter and lived with his family. Nadine viewed it as a casual fling without any serious commitments. Phoebe was the first to discover Daniel. Shortly after, Claire, the mother, learned about the relationship from her child. Claire quickly suspected that this relationship may not be long-lasting. Nadine's life changed dramatically when she found out she was pregnant with Daniel's baby. A few months later, Daniel attempted to rekindle their relationship and start a family, but it ultimately didn't work out. In November 2013, Nadine gave birth to a baby girl named Kia, but Daniel was noticeably absent during this significant moment. Instead, her sister Phoebe was the one who offered emotional support and remained a constant companion. Phoebe was by Nadine's side during childbirth, took the first photo of mother and daughter, and played a vital role in helping Nadine navigate the challenges of new motherhood. Nadine's pregnancy marked a turning point in her life, as she transitioned into her new role as a mother. Despite the difficulties she faced, Nadine found solace in Phoebe's unwavering support and love. Nadine's story is a poignant reminder of the complexities of love and relationships. Although her relationship with Daniel was unfulfilling and lacked deep emotional connection, Nadine was determined to provide a stable and loving environment for her daughter. But Daniel failed to take responsibility for his actions and showed no interest in being a devoted father, leaving Nadine to raise Kia on her own. Nadine had always tried to provide the best life for her daughter, Kia. In 2016, she wanted to build a home with her loved ones, so she rented a house where everyone could live together as a family. However, her hopes were crushed when Daniel, Kia's father, failed to move in with them. This realization marked the end of Nadine's. Daniel's constant absence and broken promises had left her emotionally drained, so she made the decision to end their relationship and start a new chapter in her life. Despite their separation, Nadine had held on to the hope that Kia would still be able to maintain a relationship with her father. Clare, Nadine's mother, had a more realistic view of Daniel's. His love for boxing was a higher priority for him than his family. In contrast, Nadine remained devoted to her daughter Kia, providing her with the love, care, and support she required. As Kia grew up without her father, she had her mother as a role model, teaching her to persevere through challenges. In October 2019, Clare suggested that Nadine celebrate her birthday in Rome. During the trip, Nadine's daughter, Kia, also referred to as Nine, confided in her mother about the struggles she was facing in her life. Nadine had moved on from her relationship with Daniel and was thriving as a single mother. She enjoyed her job, took pride in her accomplishments, and was happy with her life. Her future looked promising, especially after being offered a modeling job. Her happiness was short-lived when she discovered that Daniel continued to make unfulfilled promises to visit their daughter Kia in Ireland. When Daniel requested a meeting to give Nadine money for Kia, she was skeptical, suspecting that he just wanted to see her, not their daughter. She agreed to his request, but only because she didn't want Kia to think poorly of him. Nadine still held on to the hope of creating a real family, despite the increasing impossibility of it. To shield Kia from disappointment and pain, Nadine made excuses for her father's absence. She wanted to protect her daughter from Daniel's irresponsibility and neglect. Meanwhile, Daniel was reluctant to let Nadine go and was fearful that she might start dating other men. As a result, Nadine felt forced to keep her personal life hidden from him to avoid his controlling behavior and threats. In 2019, Nadine Lott's life drastically changed after she ended her relationship with her partner, Daniel. She started dating a new partner from Turkey, but her attempts to keep this relationship private were unsuccessful. Daniel discovered Nadine's new partner and became furious, sparking a series of stalking incidents that caused her immense distress. On December 5th, Nadine sent a clear message to Daniel, stating that their relationship was over and demanding that he stop harassing her. She believed this would finally bring an end to the toxic relationship. However, on December 13th, Nadine asked Daniel to watch their child, Kia, while she attended her aunt's birthday celebration at a local pub. Daniel agreed to watch Kia at his home in Condon, a different location from where Nadine lived, which was in Wicklow. On the night of December 14th, Daniel repeatedly tried to contact Nadine, calling her at 5:57 and 1:26 a.m., but she didn't answer. He eventually sent her a message, asking her to return home soon. Nadine returned home and changed her clothes, but the events that followed are unclear. What is known is that Daniel attacked Nadine, terrifying her 6-year-old daughter, Kia. The noise and screams caught the attention of a neighbor, Ela Klanovich, who investigated the source of the commotion. Ela saw Nadine lying on the floor in her hallway with Daniel standing over her, his face contorted with rage and panic. Horrified, Ela retreated to her apartment and quickly contacted Nadine's family. When Claire, mother of Nadine's, heard Ela's story, she felt overwhelmed with fear and anxiety. Daniel fled the scene in his Volvo, leaving behind a trail of dust and blood. When Claire rushed into Nadine's apartment, she was met with a disturbing sight. The walls and broken glass were covered in blood splatters, reflecting the horrific events that had unfolded. But the situation was far from over. It was now 9:50 a.m. Claire, Phoebe, and Kyle walked into the kitchen and were shocked by what they saw. Nadine's body was lying on the floor, brutally mutilated and showing no signs of life. Meanwhile, about 20 miles away in the town of Lahr, Daniel lost control of his car and crashed into a ditch. Miraculously, he escaped with only minor scratches. John Beck-Ken stumbled upon the wreckage and was shocked by the scene: a car with broken headlights, shattered glass, and a lone vehicle lying in a ditch. His initial thought was that the driver had been drinking after a Christmas party, but as he approached the car, he was surprised to find it empty. Suddenly, Daniel emerged from the fog, his eyes vacant, his body shaking, and his clothes covered in blood. Daniel confessed to the crime in a despairing tone to a witness. He was then taken to the hospital in an ambulance, repeatedly muttering that he loved Nadine, as if seeking forgiveness. Meanwhile, Nadine's apartment was in disarray. When paramedics and police officers arrived, they were met with a strong smell of blood. The walls and furniture were smeared with it, and the scene was chaotic. Paramedic Ian Clark was struck by the extent of the destruction. Broken dishes, shattered glass, and bloody footprints indicated that a violent crime had occurred. Phoebe and Kyle rushed Nadine to urgent care after a severe accident, where medical professionals were able to save her life despite her critical injuries, which had left her unconscious. Nadine was rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital, where she was admitted to the intensive care unit. Doctors documented severe injuries to her head, neck, and chest at 10:58 a.m. Her condition was critical, with 64 injuries found on her body, the cause of which was unclear. Nadine received multiple blood transfusions, but her condition remained critical. Claire hoped that Nadine would recover. Claire stayed by her daughter Nadine's side in the hospital, bringing comfort with familiar items from home like family photos, Nadine's favorite perfumes, and cherished toys. Despite the doctor's bleak outlook, Claire was resolute in her support, believing that her love and care would help Nadine navigate the challenging road to recovery. Meanwhile, Daniel was scheduled to appear in court on December 16th. The court decided to hold him in custody until his trial. On the same day, Claire accompanied Nadine to a follow-up examination to assess the damage to her brain. Claire prayed that Nadine would find the strength to pull through. Tragically, Nadine's injuries were too severe, and she passed away on December 17th, between 3 o'clock and 4 p.m., without ever regaining consciousness. Irish Police Colonel Dean McCarthy described the violent crime as one of the most brutal he had ever witnessed. After the murder, Chief State Pathologist Dr. Linda Mogan performed the autopsy at the city funeral home on December 18th. Following the autopsy, the victim's loved ones, particularly her family, were left with many unanswered questions. Claire was consumed by her thoughts, trying to make sense of the events that had transpired. The next day, the killer, Daniel, confessed to the heinous crime, describing how he attacked and brutally murdered Nadine. According to Daniel's account, he started by grabbing Nadine, hitting her on the head, and then repeatedly punching her with his fists. Despite her efforts to resist, Daniel continued the assault, kicking her and eventually stabbing and strangling her with a charger cord. Kia, a witness to the horrific attack, pleaded with her father to stop the assault, but her cries were ignored. Despite Nadine's desperate attempts to fight back, Daniel had remarkable physical strength and was impossible to defeat. A funeral service for Nadine was held on December 22 at St. Mary and Peter's Church in Arlo, her hometown. The ceremony drew over 1,000 mourners, and hundreds more watched the live broadcast as they gathered to bid their final farewells. 6 people carefully carried the coffin containing Nadine, a young and beautiful girl, as if she were asleep in eternal rest. The altar was surrounded by scarlet velvet roses. Nadine's mother, Claire, sat in the front row, struggling to hold back tears as she gazed at her daughter's coffin. Her eyes shone with love and admiration for she who lay before her. Family and friends gathered nearby, overcome with grief, as they clutched handkerchiefs to their faces and openly wept. David Lott, Nadine's father, stepped forward, his voice shaking with sorrow, and tearfully placed one of Nadine's elegant handbags beside the coffin. Nadine had a remarkable ability to turn anything into a stunning fashion accessory that perfectly matched her one-of-a-kind style. Next, Kyle, a close family friend, approached the altar, holding a photograph of Nadine and Kia, beaming with happiness as they hugged each other. Kia, confused and grief-stricken, clung to her mother's side, unable to comprehend the loss she had suffered. Phoebe, Nadine's sister, brought a pair of shoes to the altar, the very ones Nadine had been planning to wear to her prom. Overwhelmed with emotion, Phoebe struggled to hold back her tears. Tanith, another close friend, carefully placed a photo album on the altar, filled with cherished memories of Nadine's carefree days, joyful parties, and radiant smile. These memories would remain with them forever, a poignant reminder of the happy times they had shared with Nadine. With genuine empathy on his face, Priest Michael Moore led the ceremony with heartfelt words of eternal life and hope that soothed the grieving family and friends. Looking directly at Kia, he voiced gratitude for the immense joy she had brought Nadine during her life, wishing that Kia's own life ahead be one rich with care, protection, and enduring love. He reassured Kia that her mother's loved ones would always be there to protect her from harm, serving as her guardian angels. Nadine's sisters, Phoebe and Tanith, tearfully bid their final farewell, overcome with grief at the loss of their beloved sister. The ceremony concluded with the playing of funeral music, after which Nadine's coffin was laid to rest in the San Gabriel Cemetery. As her loved ones said their final goodbyes, they took comfort in knowing that Nadine's soul was at peace. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano was born on November 30, 1997, in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She was the youngest of 2 children to parents Eggy Diro and Tony Mano, and grew up with her older brother Alessandro. Although her parents separated when she was young, her father remained involved in her life, providing financial support and maintaining a relationship with his children. Celeste was a sociable and active student who enjoyed sports, dance. Initially, she wanted to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, she later lost interest in law and switched to studying advertising and marketing. In 2018, she landed a job at a rapidly growing e-commerce company. She rapidly advanced in her career, rising from a call center worker to the head of a department in just a few years. She was considered one of the company's most promising employees. Celeste has always been the center of attention, especially among men. However, she is very picky about her partners. Meanwhile, one of her colleagues, Louis Seiko, has had his eye on her since she started working at the company. He is almost 16 years older than her and has shown no signs of career ambition, remaining in the same subordinate position for many years. Despite his reserved nature, Louis Seiko was friendly and polite. He often asked Celeste out, but she consistently declined. Instead of taking the hint, Louis Seiko chose to view her rejections as a challenge or a game. He believed that Celeste was playing hard to get and was determined to win her over. Despite her clear lack of interest, Louis Seiko continued to try and draw her attention through various means. Celeste finds Louis Seiko's attention annoying, but she tries to keep her cool, hoping that he will eventually lose interest or focus on someone else. However, Louis Seiko's infatuation with Celeste grows stronger over time, becoming an obsession that everyone around him notices. Celeste confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never consider a romantic relationship with Louis Seiko due to several reasons. Firstly, she found him odd and unpredictable. Secondly, she was not attracted to men lacking ambition and life goals. Lastly, their significant age difference was also a factor. Despite feeling pity for Louis Seiko, she knew he had no chance with her. Louis Seiko's relentless pursuit of Celeste led to a critical mistake: he neglected his work duties. As a result, his productivity plummeted, which did not go unnoticed by senior management. Louis Seiko received 3 reprimands and warnings before being dismissed in early autumn 2019. As he gathered his belongings in the office, he appeared on the verge of tears, clearly devastated by the outcome. Celeste is relieved when Louis Seiko finally leaves her alone, but she also feels guilty, thinking that her actions contributed to his firing. Manuel, as a department manager, thanked Louis Seiko for his years of service and escorted Louis Seiko out of the building. As they parted, he patted Louis Seiko on the back and sincerely wished him luck. The dismissed employee, Louis Seiko, came to a surprising realization. He thought Celeste was hesitant to pursue an office romance because she was his superior and it might harm her career. Now, Louis Seiko believed that there were no obstacles to their happiness, and they could be together. Overcome with emotion, Louis Seiko suddenly kissed Celeste on the cheek. Shocked by his bold move, Celeste was speechless. She quickly turned around and fled back into the office without saying a word. Louis Seiko misinterpreted her reaction, thinking that Celeste had feelings for him and that he shouldn't give up on pursuing her. After being fired, Louis Seiko created a social media account and sent Celeste a friend request, which she initially accepted. However, when he began asking her to meet up and go out, she politely declined and eventually blocked him. Undeterred, Louis Seiko created a new profile and sent her another friend request the next day. Celeste tried to ignore him, but he continued to comment on her photos, complimenting her appearance and suggesting they would make a great couple. To limit Louis Seiko contact, Celeste adjusted her profile settings to restrict messages, comments, and posts to only her friends. Despite this, a week later, she started receiving romantic messages from an unknown number, which she suspected were from Louis Seiko. The messages included poems he had written, admiring her beauty and trying to persuade her to go out with him. This was particularly concerning since Louis Seiko had never had her personal phone number during their time working together, and she had only communicated with him through work channels. Celeste initially tried to address the stalker by answering one of his calls. Celeste explained to him that there was no possibility of a relationship and urged him to stop contacting her. Unfortunately, Louis Seiko was not receptive to her message and instead continued to focus on how much he enjoyed hearing her voice. Despite Celeste's attempts to block him, Louis Seiko managed to circumvent this by calling from different numbers each time. Feeling harassed, Celeste eventually changed her phone number, but to her surprise, Louis Seiko was able to obtain her new number within a week. Celeste had been trying to protect herself from Louis Seiko, a crazed fan, for about 6 months. Despite blocking Louis Seiko's phone number and fake social media accounts, and ignoring his messages, the harassment continued. The messages escalated from romantic to bold and threatening, followed by demands to meet Celeste. Celeste had no idea that Louis Seiko had begun following her from work to her home, knowing her address. At first, she caught glimpses of Louis Seiko near her home, but Celeste assumed it was because she was too nervous. However, when she realized that Louis Seiko was actually following her, she knew she needed help. Celeste decided to seek police protection, hoping to obtain a restraining order that would prohibit the stalker from approaching her or her home. The police officers were unresponsive to Celeste's concerns, seeming to mock her request for help. They claimed that Louis Seiko had not done anything illegal, as writing explicit poems or fantasies in text messages is not against the law. Without evidence of Louis Seiko following or lurking near her home, Celeste was told to leave the police station. Celeste continued to be harassed by Louis Seiko on a regular basis. During the day, she would see his car parked across the street from her office, and at night, he would drive past her house several times. This constant presence made her feel uneasy. In August 2020, Celeste returned to the police station, this time providing photo and video evidence on her phone that showed Louis Seiko was indeed stalking her. A different officer took her statement and was more serious about the situation, expressing surprise at his colleague's previous indifference. He advised Celeste to go to court immediately, where a restraining order was issued against Louis Seiko, prohibiting him from contacting or approaching her in any way. Louis Seiko's sudden disappearance brought Celeste a sense of relief and freedom. However, that feeling did not last long. Less than a month later, she began receiving text messages from unknown numbers. The messages were from Louis Seiko, who initially begged her to retract his statement and drop the restraining order, arguing that it was interfering with their romantic relationship. Over time, his tone shifted from pleading to demanding. Celeste immediately reported the messages to the police, as Louis Seiko's actions were a clear violation of the restraining order. As a result, he was fined and warned that further violations would lead to severe consequences, including the possibility of jail time, if he continued to harass her. After this incident, Louis Seiko remained silent for almost 2 months, leading Celeste to believe that he had finally left her alone. Celeste met Chris Reedsdale in September 2020, and they quickly discovered they shared many common interests. Life views and goals, which led to a romantic relationship. She confides in Chris about her harassment by Louis Seiko, who has been silent for over a month but still worries her. Chris made a conscious effort to make Celeste feel safe and supported, showering her with care and attention. A month later, in early November, Celeste decided it was time to introduce Chris to her family over dinner. Her family welcomed Chris warmly. The next few weeks passed peacefully, and Louis Seiko made no further attempts to contact Celeste. She was happy, spending all her free time with Chris, and it seemed that she had finally forgotten about worrying about Louis Seiko. On November 15, 2020, they went on a date to a cafe where they sat together, enjoying each other's company. Celeste offered to take a selfie to capture the moment. Celeste loved the photo so much that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media. By doing so, she also wanted to share the news of her new relationship and make it clear that things were getting serious. Chris also posted the photo on his page, along with a heartfelt caption expressing his love for Celeste. Sadly, this date turned out to be their last. After dropping Celeste off at home, Chris said goodbye, planning to see her again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen with her mother Eggy, before going to bed early to get ready for work the next morning. On November 16, 2020, Eggy was suddenly awakened around 4 a.m. by the sound of breaking glass. At first, she thought the noise was coming from outside, but then she heard more suspicious sounds, including banging, screams, and commotion, which seemed to be coming from within her house. Eggy quickly got out of bed, put on her robe, and rushed to her daughter Celeste's room. As she opened the door, she saw someone jumping away from Celeste's bed and escaping through a broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was shocked to see her daughter lying in a pool of blood, covered in cuts and small shards of glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, her eyes wide open and looking up. Eggy immediately called an ambulance and tried to stem the bleeding from her daughter's deep wounds while she waited for help to arrive. Tragically, despite their best efforts, Celeste passed away before police and paramedics arrived. The medical examiners found over 20 stab wounds on the victim's body, with the fatal blow being a wound to her heart. After investigating the scene and comparing it to Eggy's testimony, the police concluded that the attacker broke into the Celeste's room through the window and carried out the attack in under 3 minutes, before the Celeste's mother entered the room. The attacker used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, and the Celeste tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if the Celeste had any enemies, Eggy mentioned Louis Seiko, who had been harassing the victim with calls and threatening messages for over a year. This information was confirmed by other family members, friends, and colleagues. The suspect left behind a large number of bloody fingerprints at the scene, as well as DNA on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, which was likely due to an injury to his hand. As a result, it was crucial to detain and interrogate Louis Seiko immediately, as he was the prime suspect in the case, and to verify and compare all the evidence and witness statements. Louis Seiko was immediately taken into custody but initially claimed to be innocent, professing his love for Celeste and insisting he could never hurt her. However, forensic analysis quickly proved him wrong. His bloody fingerprints were found both in Celeste's room and on the fence surrounding her property, tying him to the crime scene. Investigation revealed a prior restraining order, which prohibited Louis Seiko from approaching Celeste. Notably, the night before the crime, he bought a hammer and large knife at a local hardware store. The store's security cameras caught him purchasing the tools at checkout. It later emerged that he used these tools to carry out the violent crime, smashing through a window to enter Celeste's house and fatally stabbing her with the knife. The case against Louis Seiko was overwhelming, with evidence showing he had been watching his victim for a long time and knew everything about her. The final straw was when she posted a photo of her new boyfriend on social media. After that, Louis Seiko bought a knife and hammer and snuck into the victim's home at night to harm her. His actions seemed deliberate and planned. Louis Seiko's personal life was marked by instability. At 39, he had never married, still lived with his parents, had few friends, and had trouble holding down a job. He also had a family history of mental health issues, with a brother serving a long prison sentence for a serious crime. Louis Seiko's lawyer arguing that he needed specialized treatment rather than imprisonment. However, this claim outraged the victim's family, who feared that Louis Seiko would escape punishment. The psychiatric experts ultimately concluded that while Louis Seiko did have mental health issues, he was fully aware of his actions when he committed the crime. He had planned the details in advance, which meant he would have to stand trial. The murder trial is set for the fall of 2023, 3 years after Celeste's tragic death. In the years leading up to the trial, Louis Seiko attempted to argue that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. He spent much of that time in a psychiatric ward. During the trial, Louis Seiko remained calm and detached, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings. He admitted to his guilt but claimed that his intention was not to take Celeste's life, but rather to win her love. However, the jury unanimously found him guilty on all counts. As a result, he was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole only after serving 30 years. The Celeste's parents drew attention to the fact that their daughter had reported the perpetrator to the police as early as 2020, seeking protection from him. However, her complaint was not accepted due to a loophole in the existing legislation. This led to calls for a change in the law, which would later be referred to as Celeste's Law. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gretchen Harrington. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 sisters, and her family moved to the small town of Brawl shortly after her birth. Gretchen's father, a pastor, took a job at the local church, and Gretchen quickly grew to love the town. She spent much of her free time outdoors with her sisters and friends. Brawl was a safe community where parents felt comfortable letting their children play outside until dark. As a member of a devoutly religious family, Gretchen spent much time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, always getting top grades. On August 15, 1975, Gretchen's family was eagerly awaiting the return of her mother and newborn sister from the hospital. Gretchen wanted to be home to greet them, but her father encouraged her to attend Sunday school to keep up her grades. Gretchen reluctantly agreed to go to church and set off with her Bible. Her older sisters, who usually walked with her, stayed home that morning. However, Gretchen wasn't worried about the short 8-minute walk to church. Sunday school is divided into 2 sessions. The first session takes place at Trinity Church and lasts an hour and a half. After that, some of the children go to Father Gretchen's church. But when the children arrived at the second church at 11:30 a.m., Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was not there. He assumed she might be at the first church, so he called to check. The pastor's wife answered, informing him that Gretchen was not there. She then told her husband, David, who was a Sunday school teacher. He was surprised by the news, since Gretchen had not attended his class that morning. Gretchen's father became worried when he couldn't find her. He asked David to contact the police and started searching the area between the churches and nearby streets, but she was nowhere to be found. He also reached out to the parents of her friends. But they were either at church or home. Her best friend, who was also David's daughter, hadn't seen her all day. As news of Gretchen's disappearance spread, the police quickly launched a search operation. Hundreds of volunteers joined in, many of whom knew Gretchen's father from his church. Together, they searched the entire town, then moved on to wooded areas and the riverbank. A police helicopter was also deployed to scan the area from above. The search continued through the night, but to no avail. The next day, more volunteers joined in. Police posted flyers with Gretchen's photo and information about her disappearance along the roads. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find Gretchen. After several days of searching, no significant clues were found and Gretchen's fate remains a mystery. The town is known for its safe environment, where children are often allowed to play outside freely without adult supervision from a young age. However, this sense of security is no longer there when Gretchen goes missing. Some people thought she might have run away from home, while others believed she had gone swimming in the river and drowned. However, the most alarming theory was that she had been abducted by someone. As a result, parents became extremely cautious and stopped letting their children go out alone. Police interviewed bystanders. They gathered some clues. One witness reported seeing a girl who looked like Gretchen near the church on the morning she went missing. According to the witness, a green sedan approached the girl, but the witness did not see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but this time described a white Cadillac approaching the girl. Police checked the owners of cars matching the description in the area. 4 days later, detectives received a new lead. A resident of Westchester, a town 30 minutes from Brawl, contacted police and reported finding children's shorts matching the description of Gretchen's clothing. Police immediately showed Gretchen's mother the shorts. But she confirmed that they did not belong to her daughter. The investigation into Gretchen's disappearance had stalled, with no progress made for several weeks. As a result, the police halted their search operation and shifted their focus to gathering more information. They continued to interview witnesses, but with each passing day, their hopes of finding Gretchen alive began to dwindle. Until October 14th, when police received a phone call. A jogger was running in a large national park, about 20 minutes from Brawl, when he stumbled upon a body. The jogger immediately alerted park rangers, who then notified the police. Upon arriving at the scene, police quickly determined that the body was that of a child. However, due to the severe state of decomposition, identification of the child was extremely difficult. Police suspected that Gretchen might be the victim, so they showed her parents the clothes found on her body. Gretchen's mother quickly identified them as her daughters because she had sewn them herself. Forensic experts later confirmed that the body was Gretchen's by comparing them to her dental records. They also determined that she had died from severe head trauma. Because the body was so badly decomposed, police were unable to gather further information, including whether Gretchen had been sexually assaulted. Additionally, DNA analysis was not available in 1975, leaving police without any further leads. News of the murder sparked renewed interest in the case, and police received numerous tips from the community. The investigation into Gretchen's death turned up no leads. Police screened nearby residents with a history of violent crime, but nothing came up. Months later, the case had made no progress. Over the years, the case was reopened periodically, and the police reviewed the available information. However, each time, the investigation yielded no new evidence. Even applying DNA analysis was of no help in this case, as no foreign DNA was found on Gretchen's body or clothing. The case of Gretchen's murder went unsolved for decades, occasionally resurfacing in newspapers and on television. However, it wasn't until recent years that the case regained widespread public attention. Two local journalists, Joanna and Mike, decided to write a book about the crime, dedicating several years to gathering information. As children, both Joanna and Mike grew up in the same town as Gretchen. Joanna, who was only 9 years old when the crime occurred, the town had changed forever, and children were no longer allowed to roam freely. Leave home unsupervised. This fear lasted for years, leaving a lasting impression on the townspeople, the memory of Gretchen's murder still fresh in their minds. To write their book, Joanna and Mike had access to the case files and interviewed individuals involved in the investigation. By carefully piecing together the events surrounding Gretchen's disappearance, they were able to reconstruct the entire story. The book, released in 2022, brought attention to Gretchen's case. Months later, a woman contacted police about Gretchen. The woman said she was 10 years old at the time of the murder and lived in Havertone, near Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her sisters, as well as many other kids in the area. She often slept over at friends' houses, and one night, while she was at her sister's house, she woke up in the middle of the night feeling someone touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw their father standing in front of her, who quickly left. The next day, she stayed another night. Her friend's dad continued to come into her bedroom and started touching her. The next morning, she finally told one of her sisters about what happened to her. She was surprised that it happened quite often with her friends. When the woman returned home, she shared her entire story with her parents. However, instead of going to the authorities, they banned her from ever going to her friend's house again. This was just a week before Gretchen went missing. The woman eventually revealed the identity of the man involved in her story, David Zanstra, the same pastor who taught at Sunday school. She also shared that a month after Gretchen went missing, one of her friends told her about the incident, that a man had tried to kidnap her. The girl refused to get into his car and later confided to her friends that the real culprit was David Zanstra. The woman provided her personal diary as evidence of the information provided. In her diary entry on September 15, 1975, she documented her friend's request to keep the encounter secret due to fears of potential harm from David Zanstra. Upon receiving this new information, the police immediately reopened the investigation into Gretchen's disappearance. While reviewing the case files, detectives discovered several suspicious factors that indirectly implicated David Zandstra. It was David Zandstra who reported Gretchen missing to the police, providing investigators with a detailed description of her clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front buttons and pockets without zippers or buttons, and a white shirt with braided hair. However, he mentioned that he had not seen Gretchen that day, raising questions about how he knew what she was wearing. His description was later confirmed by the discovery of her body, dressed exactly as he had described. Police closely examined David, the man who taught Sunday school at Gretchen's father's church. David initially claimed he had not seen Gretchen on the morning of her disappearance. However, David's alibi gave him enough time to kidnap Gretchen, kill her, dump her body in the park, and return to the church to teach. The investigation revealed that David and his family had moved to another state just months after Gretchen went missing. This sudden move, combined with David's ownership of a green scooter, attracted the attention of the police. The police decided to question David, who was now 83 years old and living in Georgia. On July 17, 2023, they began questioning David. As the conversation progressed, David realized that the police suspected him of murder. In response, he denied all accusations and asked what evidence they had against him. David was confronted with incriminating evidence, including a woman's testimony about his inappropriate behavior at a sleepover and allegations of molesting his own daughter. When he learned that his secret had been exposed, David's demeanor changed. After 48 years of silence, he finally began to talk about the murder. According to David, on the morning of the murder, he drove his green American motor station wagon to the church where Gretchen's father was the pastor. He saw Gretchen leave the house and waited until no one was around before approaching her. He offered her a ride, and she agreed. However, instead of taking Gretchen to the church, David drove her to a secluded park area. He stopped the car and instructed her to undress, but Gretchen refused and asked to go home. In response, David struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. He then removed her clothes and committed the crime before driving her to another park. He carried her body into the bushes and concealed it with branches. David then returned to the church to begin his classes. When David confessed to the crime, the police arrested him for Gretchen's murder. David went to Pennsylvania, where he was held pending trial. David's work held a respectable position in society, which protected him from suspicion. However, after the truth finally came to light, the police obtained a DNA sample and began comparing it with DNA from other unsolved cases. They also investigated the disappearances of young girls in the cities where he worked. Police have linked David to the disappearance of 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, who went missing in 1991. The case resembles Gretchen's. At the time, David Zandstra was a pastor in that same neighborhood. The police currently have no concrete evidence against David, but they have found similarities between the various cases and Gretchen's kidnapping. Therefore, they are investigating David as the possible perpetrator of the cases. The trial for Gretchen's murder has not yet begun. David's attorney is trying to delay the process and advise him to withdraw his confession. If this happens, the trial could drag on for years, and given his advanced age, David may not live to see the verdict.
One such controversial case was the crime that occurred in the Mullenix family. Let's try to make sense of it together. Let's find out the reasons for the tension and weigh the responsibility of each person involved. Could it be that the victim is far from innocent? Or is her executioner a wolf in sheep's clothing? An unexpected discovery. On September 14, 2006, Newport Beach was troubled. A woman's body was discovered in the body of water. Apparently, the corpse had been wrapped in a sheet and then placed in a box. When exposed to the water, the unreliable wrapping fell apart, and exposed what should have been hidden from view. The body floated to the surface after being in the water for no more than a day. Normally, warm water would speed up the decomposition process. Therefore, the appearance of the dead left much to be desired. Forensic medical examination established the cause of the woman's death was multiple stab wounds. In total, she received about 52 blows, one of which came directly to the eye. Specialists agreed that the injuries were caused by 3 different knives, which means there were at least 2 people who attacked the victim. Naturally, the victim had no identification on her, so the police had to work hard to find out her identity. Among the missing, the profile of the woman was not listed, and no new disappearances have been reported so far. Everything pointed to attempts to cover up the crime committed. Experts also determined that the woman had resorted to plastic surgery during her lifetime. She had breast augmentation. Since the identification of bodies by serial number of implants became a routine procedure, the identity of the murdered was soon established. She was 56-year-old Barbara Mullenix. Who is Barbara Mullenix? The future Mrs. Mullenix was born on May 29, 1950 in Munich, Germany. In her youth, she was very beautiful and sociable. Therefore, she was always in the center of attention. However, these qualities brought her not only success with the opposite sex, but also caused her a lot of trouble. At the age of 18, she was subjected to violence. The girl wanted to forget as quickly as possible what happened. But after a while, she learned about the pregnancy. To make an abortion, Barbara did not become, she decided to bear the child and give it to a good family. After a while, she got married. In the marriage, she gave birth to a son, Alex Hagwood. However, the marital relationship with her first husband did not last long. At the age of 35, Barbara's attention was attracted by Bruce Mullenix. The man recalled that she was a special woman and immediately liked him. She was characterized by straightforwardness and self-confidence. In November 1987, the couple married. Mr. Mullenix was younger than his wife for 9 years, but it was not particularly felt. Barbara knew how to arouse interest and liked to have fun. After moving to Oklahoma City, a daughter, Rachel, was born to the family. Everything was fine at first, but as time went on, problems began. In the evenings, Bruce could skip on a mug of beer and on weekends to drop in on friends. Barbara at first supported the company, but later became addicted to alcohol. Apparently, the events that occurred in her youth left their imprint. Under the influence of alcohol, the woman, despite the parents' relationship with each other, they loved their daughter very much. They spoiled her and tried to please her in every way. While living in Oklahoma, before the divorce, Rachel had a large room while her father and mother lived in a small one. On the occasion of the girls' birthday parties were always held in the house. Miss Mullenix recalled that she was very close to her mother, even more so than most mothers and daughters. But such a close bond existed only when the woman was sober. The rest of the time, Rachel tried to stay away from her, made no attempt to even talk to her. Our relationship was generally good, but when Barbara drank, she got angry and crazy. She was the first one to get into a fight. Bruce confirmed what his daughter said. Since the house Mullenixoff was located near Hollywood, Barbara was in an extraordinary delight. She loved movies, especially singled out Gone with the Wind. A short time after the move, the woman managed to get a job as an extra. Hollywood dream come true. She felt that in time she would be offered a more serious role. But for now, together with her daughter, took an active part in the masses in movies and TV shows. The scene of the crime was established. Who is the culprit? Police officers could not understand why none of the relatives did not report the disappearance of the murdered woman. Soon, police officers Steve Mack and Joe Cartwright obtained a search warrant for Barbara's home. They hypothesized that since the woman was wrapped in a sheet, the crime could have occurred in bed. So the search for evidence had to begin at Mrs. Mullenix's residence. The police found no one at Barbara's house. At first glance, everything seemed to be in order. There were no visible signs of a crime. However, in one of the rooms on the second floor, a disassembled bed attracted attention. It was without a mattress. It only took a couple hours to reconstruct the scene. The detectives' assumptions had a real basis. Specialists found traces of blood on the walls. Somebody went to a lot of trouble to get rid of the evidence. The blood-stained mattress had apparently been destroyed. There was no doubt that the crime had taken place in this place. The police also believed that the owner of the house knew the perpetrator. Therefore, the first suspect was Mr. Mullenix. It was a strange coincidence that the man was out of town. In addition, just the day after the body was discovered, Bruce returned home. He explained that he was worried because his wife and daughter were not answering their phone calls. The man, of course, had a premonition of something wrong, but in no way expected to hear such a thing. Nevertheless, the news of Barbara's terrible death, the former spouse took it calmly. This also alerted the detectives, so they began to investigate the reason for his departure. Bruce said he was on a business trip. Mr. Mullenix's management confirmed his alibi. The investigation was back to square one. Daughter's love. When Rachel turned 17 years old, she met with Ian Allen. The guy was older than the girl by 4 years. Young people fell madly in love with each other. Ian supported Rachel in everything, even helped with household chores. At first, Barbara liked him. They even spent time together. They went for walks together. They went out together. In order for the lovers to meet freely, Rachel's parents got a special permit. Apparently, so required by law and police officers. Law enforcers often drew attention to the non-standard couple. The girl was allowed to be absent until 1 o'clock in the morning, but she often violated the established schedule, for which she was repeatedly under house arrest. After a while, Mrs. Mullenix noticed that her daughter's feelings were growing into something more. To make matters worse, the two announced that they had decided to get engaged. The move seemed too quick to Barbara. Ian and Rachel had only known each other for 3 months. Barbara didn't want to lose her daughter and the payments she received from her ex-husband. Barbara decided to increase her influence and discipline. Rachel was caught between two fires. She didn't want to offend her mother, whose control was only increasing. Ian, in turn, did not give way. So her mother and Ian began to compete for Rachel's attention. Rachel's fragile psyche suffered with every quarrel and altercation that arose between them. By the end of the summer of 2006, Ian and Barbara's relationship finally deteriorated. The younger Alan was afraid that Rachel's mother would convince her not to date him or forbid her from doing so at all. One day, when Rachel once again violated her schedule for coming home, Barbara exploded. Despite the late hour, Mrs. Mullenix headed to the boyfriend's house and made a scandal. This situation really offended and angered Ian. It became clear to everyone that it couldn't go on like this. On the trail of the fugitives, Bruce was no longer suspected of killing his ex-wife. Detectives turned their attention to Rachel and Ian. Police found out that Barbara had been feeling lonely lately and was drinking a lot. It made her inadequate. Her daughter's attention was slipping away from her. She considered Ian an unworthy companion and Rachel a traitor. That's why Mrs. Mullenix often quarreled with them. Besides, no one knew where the lovers were. They never contacted each other. Given the complicated relationship between Barbara and Ian, the girl's father assumed that Ian was a criminal who was being sought. Rachel, in all likelihood, is not safe either. Otherwise, she would have made herself known, Mr. Mullenix pondered. The police began searching for the missing persons. The Allens' house was also searched. When the detectives checked Ian's computer, they found curious queries on the internet. The guy was researching the route of transportation to the city of Tampa, which is located in Florida. Bruce remembered that before moving in with him, Barbara and Rachel lived there. The couple was reported missing. All police stations in the country received bulletins with a description of the appearance of young people. In addition, the alleged suspect did not disappear without a trace. He left a decent trail behind him. Ian Allen's credit card was used to make a purchase at a gas station in Louisiana. That's also where a surveillance camera captured the guy's truck. Mr. Mullenix's fears were confirmed. Rachel was indeed with him. The only thing left to do was to intercept them. So officers Steve Mack and Joe Cartwright called their colleagues from the next town on the couple's route. Local police shut down highways in search of the van. Ian Allen and Rachel Mullinex were soon caught. The kidnapping story. "Do you know I've been kidnapped?" Rachel shouted when apprehended. "What right did you have to arrest me, to throw me on the ground in handcuffs?" She continued, "I'm not a criminal for you to treat me like this." Detectives Joe and Steve waited for the moment when they could finally question the couple. 2 days later, they arrived at a Louisiana police station. Miss Mullinex insisted that she had not killed her mother. Once investigators pressed the girl, she blamed it on her boyfriend. Rachel claimed that Ian killed her mom and afterwards forced her to run away with him. The police asked for more details about what happened on September 13th, 2006. "I woke up to hear noises in the house. Then I realized that my mother was screaming a lot and calling for help. I rushed to her room. What I saw shocked me. Ian had attacked my mom with a knife. He was stabbing her over and over again. I jumped on him, tried to push him away. He was very strong, so he easily fought me back. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was in a kind of stupor." Rachel began her story. Afterwards, she added that the boyfriend forced her to help cover her tracks. He also insisted that she pack her mother's belongings into bags. Rachel claimed that by doing so, Ian wanted to stage Barbara's unexpected departure. At first, the detectives wanted to believe the girl. The shock she'd been through could send anyone into a state of frustration, but for some reason, the witness to the crime was overly justified. And afterwards, she fiercely insisted that she was not involved in the crime. Furthermore, there were no signs of resistance on Rachel's body. When communicating with Ian Allen, police officers found out an interesting fact. His girlfriend from time to time told about how hard it is for her to live with her mother, how intemperate the woman behaves when she drinks. Instead of reconciling the rivals, Rachel only increased Ian's negative feelings. Certainly some of the facts were true, but some of them were clearly exaggerated. That was why Ian was finally convinced that Barbara would not let them rest. Sometime after the night's quarrel at the Allen house, holding a grudge against Barbara, the lad headed for the Mullinex house. Rachel was under house arrest. I wanted to see her. I knew Barbara wouldn't let me in to see her, so I came secretly. I wanted to sneak into her room quietly, but Barbara spotted me. We got into an argument that escalated into threats. With the folding knife I always carry, I decided to scare her. As soon as the blade was at Mrs. Mullinex's throat, she started screaming. This made me angry and provoked an attack. Things got out of control. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Rachel really had nothing to do with it, Ian said about the incident. To the surprise of the investigators, the guy did not try to avoid responsibility and confessed to everything. Over time, detectives became increasingly convinced that Rachel Mullinex was directly involved in the crime. Her boyfriend was clearly covering for her. CCTV footage from the gas station convenience store where the couple had stopped was scrutinized. Rachel was walking around the store looking for groceries. At that point, she could have safely called for help or run away. But for some reason, she didn't. Moreover, as it turned out later, the girl had the opportunity to call her father, but preferred to make a call to her friend. It was found that a couple of hours after the crime, Miss Mullinex sent a message to Ian Allen. "I love you," she wrote in her text. And that's how Rachel finally lost the trust of the investigation. Rachel's defense. It took 2 years to gather and analyze all the evidence in the Barbara Mullinex murder case. During that time, Rachel turned 19 years old. For any other girl, that's a great age. There is a whole life ahead of her. For young Mullinex, her future depended on the jury's verdict, and she tried to convince everyone of her innocence. When Rachel talked about her childhood, her face lit up. It was obvious that the tender years were happily spent. No doubt Barbara and Bruce had tried to make them so, despite many circumstances. Recalling their relationship with her mother, the daughter said that they were good. They were marred only by alcohol, which was abused by the murdered woman and the boyfriend who appeared over time. At school, I was known as a girl from a not very prosperous family with alcoholic parents. When my father drank, he was still himself. He was kind and considerate, which can't be said for my mom. She described the family atmosphere in court. Her words were confirmed by her friend Kelsey Douglas, who often visited the Mullenix family. Kelsey said that Rachel always tried to please her mother in everything, but apparently there came a point when she could no longer tolerate the harsh control and insults. She admitted to me that she had started drinking from time to time. Rachel didn't know what else to do. She had nowhere else to turn. The alcohol helped relieve tension, to forget for a while about family difficulties, Miss Douglas reported. Alex, Rachel's older brother, strangely enough, also stood up for Rachel. He considered her a victim rather than a murderer. That's why he refused to believe in her guilt to the last. He told the court that his sister had been a good and obedient child. She did well at school, practiced sports and ballet. As for the relationship between Barbara, Rachel, and Ian, Alex noted that at first they were great. All three spent a lot of time together. Barbara's eldest son also reported that their mother abused alcohol and illegal substances before her death. She took stimulants and tranquilizers and often threw loud parties. When Barbara realized that Rachel and her boyfriend wanted to distance themselves, she couldn't accept it. In addition, she found it difficult to get by on her own without alimony and maintenance money. All of this became a source of irritation. According to Alex, Mrs. Mullenix was a very controlling woman. She wanted to be in control of everything. With Rachel, she certainly went overboard in this. My mother loved to be the center of attention. With Ian coming into Rachel's life, her position shifted to the side, Alex summarized. In the involvement of his daughter in the murder of Barbara could not believe and the girl's father. He believed that she loved her mother very much and was incapable of hurting her. In all the time, Rachel did not accuse her mother of the weaknesses that were peculiar to her. She simply reported them as a fact. The girl repeatedly stated that she felt sorry for her. Barbara had a difficult life. About the relationship of her parents, Miss Mullenix recalled with bitterness. Rachel said that the slightest details in the behavior of his father drove his mother into a rage. Barbara often snapped at him, considered a spender. Rachel also told the court that she regretted her love for the young man. She made a big mistake when she started dating him. Their feelings brought discord to her relationship with her mother. Ian felt that my mom was a threat to him. He also wanted to control me like she did. My boyfriend wasn't ideal either. Often hurt and treated me like I was his property. I was torn between the two. Every time there was an argument with my mom, I shared about it. It made it easier for me to get over what happened, Rachel recalled. She concluded by adding that Ian did everything he could to prevent harm to what he thought was his prosecution's position. Sonia Balest, the prosecutor involved in the case, did not believe Rachel's story. She claimed that the girl's angelic appearance was deceptive because she thought she was already smart enough for her age. Therefore, the position Miss Mullenix had chosen was thoroughly refuted. The officers who investigated supported the prosecutor in this. Steve Mack and Joe Cartwright believed that Rachel had some mental health issues. According to them, she was the meanest girl they had ever spoken to. During the interview, the prosecutor competently appealed the inconsistencies in Miss Mullenix's testimony. She inquired of Rachel why she never once called for help when she could have done so, to which the girl replied that she was confused and did not know how to behave in such a situation. The defendant also added that she was frightened by Ian's behavior, which was difficult to predict. The prosecutor drew attention to the fact that Rachel had not a single chance to escape. The girl's actions were atypical for a kidnapped victim. The prosecution believed that Miss Mullenix had not only attacked her mother herself, but had planned the crime in advance. When they tried to ask Rachel about the details of Ian's stabbing, Rachel was unable to answer. Her testimony changed and contradicted each other more than once. During the trial, the defendant stated that she was not present during the argument between Barbara and Ian. Allegedly, she simply left them in her room, hoping they would calm down. Only then did she hear screaming and the sounds of a struggle, after which she came running back and saw that the guy attacked her mom with a knife. However, Rachel's version did not coincide with the evidence that was found at the scene of the crime. The forensic report clearly established that Barbara's attacker was not alone. Specialists estimated that 5 minutes had been enough to kill the woman. Rachel continued to insist on her own innocence. Questions: why she didn't call emergency services, Why she wrote a love text to the killer boyfriend were frozen in the air unanswered. The forensic psychiatrist who worked with Miss Mullenix diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder. He believed she truly loved her mother, but she hated her equally as much. By the way, people with this kind of personality are prone to erratic behavior. It's often destructive to both the unsub and others. Bitter verdict. It took the jury 3 days to reach a final verdict. Ian Allen was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. For Rachel Mullenix, the court's verdict was no consolation either. She was found to be involved in the death of her mother and qualified the act as first-degree murder. The girl was sentenced to life in prison. Her first chance for parole will come when the inmate turns about 41 years old. After the verdict was announced, the prosecutor said she was relieved. There is no question that Ian Allen and Rachel Mullenix killed Barbara, Sonia Balest concluded. For a mother, such a death was a true betrayal. The day Barbara brought her daughter into the world, she signed her own death warrant. The child she loved immensely became her light and darkness at the same time. Undoubtedly, Mrs. Mullenix made many mistakes in her life. She was not an ideal mother, but she never abandoned her children to perdition. Barbara's jealousy and fear of being alone hardened the woman's already strong character. But people in love always had a choice. They could simply leave to preserve their right to their feelings. In time, things would have calmed down. Relationships would have mended. Perhaps Barbara would have switched to something else. And the grandchildren Rachel and Ian would give her would be her outlet.
Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alex Murdaugh. Alex Murdaugh attempted to follow in his family's footsteps by pursuing a law degree from the University of North Carolina, where he met his future wife, Margaret Maggie Branton. They started dating in 1991 and got married 2 years later, on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard Buster Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Alex joined his family's law firm, PMPD, as a personal injury attorney, aiming to continue his family's legacy. However, unlike his ancestors, Alex misused the power and influence his family's firm provided, covering up financial crimes, theft, and possibly even murder. For over a decade, Alex's dishonest dealings went unnoticed until his youngest son, Paul, was involved in a fatal boating accident. This incident was the latest in a series of suspicious deaths surrounding the Murdaugh family, leading people to speculate that these accidents were not coincidental and were instead part of a larger cover-up, given the family's history and resources. Here's what happened on February 23, 2019. Paul Murdaugh, fresh out of high school, took his family's boat to Pucas Island for a party with friends. The group, including his girlfriend Morgan Dowie, Anthony Cook, and Miley Allman, wanted an unsupervised night of fun. They planned a house party and oyster roast on the island. To make the night complete, Paul used his older brother's ID to buy beer and hard liquor. They left the Murdaugh River House around 7 p.m. and continued partying until midnight. Feeling restless, Paul suggested driving the boat to downtown Beaufort, where he and his friend Connor had 2 rounds of shots at around 1 a.m. As they headed back to the boat, a surveillance camera caught a tender moment between Anthony and Mallory. Paul, who was heavily intoxicated, started acting strangely on a boat ride with friends. At 1:15 a.m., the group got back on the water, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Paul drove the boat in circles, showing signs of intoxication, and got into an argument with the others. Anthony wanted to get out on a nearby rock, but Paul refused. GPS footage later showed that the boat's speed increased at some point. Although Paul denied deliberately speeding up, he was in control of the wheel. The boat crashed into Arrow Creek Bridge at 2:20 a.m., throwing Mallory into the water. The others were severely injured. Connor broke his jaw, and Morgan's hand was badly hurt. Connor called 911, and help arrived soon after. When the deputy sheriff arrived, he saw blood in the main compartment and a large split in the hull from the impact. All the teenagers involved were extremely drunk, and everyone except Anthony required hospital treatment. Paul refused treatment despite being extremely agitated and having a blood alcohol level of 0.243, significantly higher than the legal limit. The search for Mallory's body took 8 days, and she was found to have died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and drowning. Despite multiple eyewitnesses stating that Paul was out of control while driving the boat, he was not arrested or charged. This led to rumors that Alex Murdaugh had used his influence to protect his son from justice. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was served with a wrongful death lawsuit. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, was aware that her son was drunk when they went boating and that Buster had helped them obtain fake IDs to buy alcohol. Paul was finally charged with 3 felonies on April 18, 2019, but he never made it to court because he died before his trial. A series of mysterious deaths have been linked to the Murdaugh family. One incident involved Stephen Smith, a gay teenager, who was found dead on July 8, 2015. His official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and it was initially ruled a hit-and-run incident with no suspect arrested. However, Stephen's mother believed he was the victim of a hate crime. There were rumors that Stephen was in a relationship with Alex Murdaugh's oldest son, Buster, and that Buster might have been involved in Stephen's death. Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's longtime housekeeper, died on February 26, 2018, due to complications from a severe head injury. Alex Murdaugh claimed that his dogs had caused her to trip and fall, but there was no autopsy to confirm this account. The case was reopened on March 22, 2023, and it was revealed that Gloria's death was actually a murder, although no suspects have been named. Alex Murdaugh's family was involved in a wrongful death lawsuit after his housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, died in 2018. The lawsuit resulted in a $4.3 million insurance policy settlement, but the money never reached Satterfield's sons. Instead, Murdaugh allegedly conspired with his friend Corey Fleming, a lawyer and godfather to one of Murdaugh's sons, to steal the payout. The money was diverted to Murdaugh's bank account, and the Satterfield family was never notified. Satterfield's sons filed a new civil lawsuit against Murdaugh in September 2021. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Satterfield's death, citing inconsistencies in the coroner's report. The Satterfield family allowed authorities to exhume Satterfield's body for further investigation. Meanwhile, Murdaugh was facing numerous financial and embezzlement charges. He was allegedly involved in a money laundering and painkiller ring with his distant cousin Curtis Smith, which lasted from 2013 to 2021. On September 4, 2021, Murdaugh orchestrated a scheme in which Smith shot him in an attempt to collect a $10 million life insurance policy. However, the bullet only caused superficial injuries, and Murdaugh was able to call 911 himself. Days later, Murdaugh confessed to the scheme and was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. He surrendered himself and was taken into custody. 2 days later, he announced his resignation from his family's law firm and entered rehab. However, it was soon revealed that Murdaugh had misappropriated $792,000 from his law firm. His law license was indefinitely suspended in September 2021. Investigators continued to uncover numerous financial crimes, tax evasions, and embezzlements committed by Murdaugh. After leaving rehab, Murdaugh was arrested again and charged with 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretenses. He was denied bond and later indicted on 27 counts of financial misconduct, accused of stealing money from clients, lawyers, and the Satterfield family. Alex Murdaugh faced additional charges on December 9, 2021, with 21 new counts added to the existing 27, bringing the total to 48. The charges included forgery, money laundering, computer crimes, breach of trust, and obtaining signature or property by false pretenses. It was estimated that Murdaugh had stolen over $6.2 million from his victims. The state's investigation into his business dealings took months, with new charges emerging almost daily. By June 2022, the charges against him had risen to 81, and by the time he was formally disbarred on July 13, 2022, he faced 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. One of the victims' mothers filed a legal claim against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh, raising questions about the character of the once prominent attorney. Could he be hiding something even more sinister, such as the murder of his wife and son? What could have been his motive? The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, escalating, revisited the double murder case, considering new information gathered during the investigation into Murdaugh's financial crimes. They discovered that Alex and Maggie Murdaugh's marriage was troubled, and Maggie was living apart from her husband at their beach home on Edisto Island. Maggie's sister, Marion Proctor, told law enforcement that Maggie had not planned to see Alex on the night of the murders. Alex had asked Maggie to meet him at the family's hunting lodge, where she and her younger son were later found shot dead near the dog kennels. Alex claimed to have taken a long nap before leaving to visit his ailing mother, who suffered from dementia. He stated that he was away for 45 minutes to an hour and a half and found his wife and son dead upon his return. However, law enforcement suspected that Alex's timeline was questionable and lacked a clear motive for the murders. The investigation revealed that weeks before the murder, the state grand jury had subpoenaed Alex Murdaugh's finances, which threatened to expose his financial wrongdoings. Additionally, his law firm had discovered his misappropriation of company funds, and he was confronted about it on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities believed that the financial pressure had pushed Alex to hatch a plan to divert attention from his crimes and garner sympathy in the public eye. 13 months after the fatal shooting, Alex Murdaugh was charged with the murders of his wife and son. The prosecutor alleged that Murdaugh had shot and killed his wife and son at close range with a shotgun and an AR-style rifle. The murder weapons were never found. Murdaugh's defense team argued that two shooters were involved due to the different weapons used. Expert witness testimony suggested that the shooter was likely between 5'2" and 5'4" tall, which ruled out Alex Murdaugh as a suspect due to his 6'4" height. However, under cross-examination, the expert admitted that there were other possible explanations for the bullet trajectory beyond the shooter's height. The investigation revealed that Maggie was shot with 300 blackout ammunition from an AR-style rifle, and a box of this ammo was found at the Murdaugh family estate. Prosecutors argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid accountability for his financial crimes. Alex's lawyers countered that this didn't make sense, as it would only shift attention to himself and put him in the spotlight of a murder investigation. Alex was a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but his lawyer claimed he had an ironclad alibi for the night of the murders and no motive to kill his family. Prosecutors presented two videos taken on the night of the murder, which appeared to show Alex wearing different shirts. The Snapchat video taken from Paul's phone showed Alex wearing a blue shirt, while the body cam footage showed him wearing a different shirt. Investigators couldn't find the blue shirt, and prosecutors suggested Alex tried to influence a key witness's account of what he was wearing. Cell phone data and testimony from Alex's mother's caregiver confirmed that Alex was only at his mother's home for 15 to 20 minutes, contradicting his claim of staying for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. The most crucial piece of evidence was a video found on Paul's phone, recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before the murders. The video featured the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex, placing Alex at the scene of the crime. This contradicted his previous alibi and confirmed his presence at the dog kennels where the murders occurred. Alex testified that he didn't shoot his wife or son, but admitted to lying about his alibi. Alex Murdaugh changed his story, claiming that his opioid addiction and resulting paranoia led him to lie to law enforcement. However, prosecutors argued that Murdaugh fabricated this excuse after murdering his wife and son. They believed he used his wife's phone to create an alibi by making calls and sending texts, including "Call me, babe," at 9:47 p.m. Phone data showed that Murdaugh's and his wife's phones locked simultaneously, and Alex's phone recorded a sudden increase in steps around the time of the murder. Prosecutors suggested this was evidence of him trying to hide or dispose of evidence, but his lawyers disputed this, pointing out that the step patterns on Alex's phone did not match his wife's. The decisive evidence came from a video recorded at the dog kennels. After deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found Murdaugh guilty on all counts on March 2, 2023. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Additionally, he received a 5-year sentence for possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Murdaugh pleaded guilty to 22 financial crimes as part of a deal, but maintains his innocence in the murders. He appealed his conviction on March 9, 2023. In a surprise move, his lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, alleging that Rebecca Hill, a court clerk, had engaged in jury tampering. Hill denies the allegations, which include advising jurors to disregard Murdaugh's testimony and other defense evidence, pressuring them to reach a quick guilty verdict, and misrepresenting critical information to the trial judge. A hearing is scheduled for Murdaugh's lawyers to present evidence and witnesses to support their claim. However, a judge has not yet been assigned to preside over the hearing. With over 100 financial and drug crime charges pending, as well as multiple lawsuits, it is clear that the Alex Murdaugh case is far from over. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, by her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, As time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martins slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out, and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison." However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marilyn Levesque. In the year 2020, the body of 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque was discovered with multiple stab wounds, sparking a massive public outcry. The community was outraged, demanding that Canadian authorities provide an explanation for how such a heinous crime could have occurred. Marilyn was born in 1997 in Chicoutimi, Quebec, to Corinne Levesque and François Goulet, who separated soon after her birth. Those close to her described her as kind, outgoing, and always friendly. Marilyn grew up partly with her mother and partly in foster homes. She left her hometown for Quebec City at the age of 17 and returned after a breakup with her boyfriend. From then on, she commuted between the two cities, working in Quebec City 2 or 3 days a week and taking the bus or carpool services since she didn't have a driver's license. By early 2020, Marilyn was living with her new boyfriend Gabriel Truchon in the Chicoutimi district, about 130 miles from Quebec City. Gabriel said Marilyn dreamed of a stable life and wanted to pursue a career in architecture. Tragically, on January 22, 2020, everything changed. Marilyn was in Quebec City for work, while Gabriel stayed in Chicoutimi. At around 9 p.m., Gabriel became worried when he couldn't reach Marilyn after several attempts to contact her. He then texted her co-workers, hoping someone had seen her. Soon, Gabriel received a call from an unknown number. The caller, identifying himself as a police officer, told Gabriel that Marilyn had been found dead. Forensic experts later determined that she died from multiple stab wounds, with more than 50 wounds on her body. To continue with Marilene's story, let's go back 17 years. In 2003, Chantal Dechaine, a 32-year-old bartender at a Quebec hotel, met Eustachio Gallese, her 36-year-old boss, who oversaw the hotel's guest meals. Soon after, Chantal and Eustachio started a passionate romance. At the time, Chantal was a single mother of 2 girls, aged 10 and 6, whose fathers she had not lived with for several years. Eustachio, on the other hand, had been married to Joanne Lafront since 1996 and had 3 children with her. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by instances of physical violence. For instance, Eustachio would occasionally smash walls in their home during fits of anger. On one occasion, while traveling through Ottawa, he assaulted his wife and was arrested, spending 7 days in jail. Despite these incidents and other forms of verbal abuse, Joanne Lafront claimed she wasn't afraid of her husband, describing him as a good father to their children, although his demanding job often kept him from spending time with the family. When Eustachio began his romance with Chantal, he left his wife Joanne and their 3 children to move in with his new love. The whirlwind relationship was soon formalized, and Chantal and Eustachio got married. At first, everything seemed perfect for the couple, as is often the case. Eustachio got along great with Chantal's kids, and they spent their weekends together, going to the movies, skating, and enjoying other activities. However, the relationship began to unravel as quickly as it had started. Meanwhile, Eustachio was working over 60 hours a week as the food and beverage manager at the hotel. He warned his supervisors he would quit on December 31st, 2004, due to the unbearable job pressures, but he didn't confide in his employer about his personal struggles. Eustachio Gallese and Chantal Dechaine had a highly complex and often volatile relationship. According to recent accounts from witnesses, Gallese was intensely jealous, while others claimed that both partners were possessive and frequently argued about it. Friends close to the couple revealed that Gallese would sometimes shout, but never physically harmed Chen, who would often retaliate by insulting or even slapping him. The tension in the relationship climaxed on October 21st, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's 2 daughters were still asleep, having spent the evening with Joanne Heon, their babysitter, who slept over at their house because their mother worked the night shift. From the couple's conversation, Joanne learned of the night's argument between them. The babysitter left the house around 7:15 a.m., and the children were supposed to go to school around 8 a.m. Before leaving for school, the girls went in to greet their mother, who was in the bedroom with Eustachio. It was the last time they saw their mother alive. At 1:29 p.m., Eustachio Gallese went to his ex-wife Joanna Lafrance's home to drop off his cash savings. While there, he called the police and confessed to killing his wife, Chantal. 10 minutes later, at 1:39 p.m., the police arrived at Joanna's home, where Gallese repeated his confession and surrendered. Gallese urged the police to hurry to the school before Chantal's 2 daughters returned home and discovered their mother's body. Meanwhile, the police went to Chantal's home, where they found her bloody body on the bed in her bedroom. Next to the body, they found 2 blood-stained knives and a broken hammer. An autopsy revealed that Chantal died from multiple hammer blows and stab wounds. The hammer blows were so brutal that the handle broke. In 2006, a jury found Gallese guilty of second-degree murder during his trial. He admitted that he killed Chantal because she had decided to leave him. Gallese was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Gallese had a history of violent behavior towards his partners. In 1997, he was jailed for 7 days for assaulting his first wife, Joanne Lafrance. Tragically, he went on to kill his second wife, Chantal Dechaine, in 2004. This pattern of behavior suggests that Gallese had a tendency to abuse women. Despite this disturbing history, the parole board to release him in March 2019 concluding that his risk of reoffending was low. As a condition of his parole, Galisi was permitted to date women to meet his sexual needs, but with strict limitations. His parole officer set rules for his interactions with women, allowing him to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month, but prohibiting romantic relationships. Additionally, he was required to observe a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. unless attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. However, Galisi struggled to abide by these rules, frequently visiting the massage parlor several times a week instead of just once a month. In March 2019, Galisi was released. Later, in June, the 51-year-old visited an erotic massage parlor where he met 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque, an employee. Although Marilyn's family knew she earned a living by providing intimate services, she rarely discussed it with them, and when she did, it was often in a light-hearted or joking manner. Those close to her described her as sensitive. However, she had become rigid about her job, and her relatives believed part of her wanted to change her life and quit. Yet, it's not easy to revert to minimum wage after becoming accustomed to earning the equivalent of 2 weeks' work in just 2 hours. How did Marilyn end up in prostitution? The circumstances are unclear, but one thing is certain: her childhood was difficult. She was placed in foster homes repeatedly. Marilyn's boyfriend and close friends were aware of her workplace and the nature of her job. According to a friend, Marilyn didn't have conflicting feelings about her profession. She openly discussed it without pride or shame. Since she worked in Quebec, 100 miles from their home, her boyfriend didn't object to her occupation. Galisi, who was largely left to his own devices, began visiting a massage parlor multiple times a week. Although he seemed reformed to the parole board, his fundamental nature remained unchanged. On several occasions, he became violent towards female employees, resulting in him being banned from the establishment. Unbeknownst to the staff, Galisi was a convicted criminal who had served time in prison for murdering his wife. In late summer 2019, when it was discovered that Galisi had assaulted multiple women at a massage parlor, the parole board prohibited him from visiting erotic massage parlors, warning him that he would face imprisonment if he didn't comply. However, by then, Galisi had developed romantic feelings for Marilyn and found a way to bypass the rules. He offered her $1,300 Canadian to meet him in a hotel room, which she accepted. This was their first encounter outside of a massage parlor, and it happened without any issues. Galisi felt deeply sympathetic towards Marilyn, so he started opening up to her about his emotional struggles. He shared with her how much he still missed his late wife, whom he had mourned for 15 years, but he didn't reveal that he was responsible for her death. After this, Galisi began to sense that Marilyn was distancing herself from him, and their connection was deteriorating. He felt rejected, which sparked anxiety and jealousy within him. Galisi scheduled another hotel meeting with Marilyn for January 22, 2020. Marilyn told her boyfriend that she generally avoided hotel meetings, preferring massage parlors instead, as they had guards to protect the workers from potential issues and to escort troublesome clients out. However, the attractive offer of $2,000 convinced Marilyn to agree to another hotel meeting. Around 8:30 p.m., after dinner, the couple went to their hotel room. At 11:35 p.m., Galisi arrived at the police station and, similar to his 2004 case, confessed to murdering Marilyn. The police rushed to the hotel, hoping to find Marilyn still alive. Unfortunately, she had already been killed. The autopsy revealed 57 stab wounds on her body. It was determined that Galisi had spent about 2 hours at a bar before surrendering to the police, during which time he got rid of the murder weapon and Marilyn's cell phone. A terrible event occurred, but it was made even more distressing by the perpetrator's identity, past, and the circumstances surrounding his latest atrocity, sparking widespread outrage and demands for answers from the authorities. Bill Blair, the Secretary of Public Safety, expressed his condolences to Marilyn's family and stated that her death was preventable. Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Lebel sought an explanation for how a violent criminal like Galassi was granted parole and questioned whether the officers involved had sufficient training to assess public safety risks. She also called on Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair to investigate the situation. An investigation commission was established to examine the parole board's actions and found deficiencies in their work, case management, and supervision of the offender. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada described Marilene's death as a terrible tragedy that should never have occurred, promising that the Correctional Service of Canada, in collaboration with the Parole Board, would take significant steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Despite the high-profile comments, no one faced serious punishment in the end. Some staff members from the Parole Board were reassigned to different roles, while others were sent for additional training. Unfortunately, there is no way to bring back the young woman who lost her life. It is hoped that her tragic death will make decision-makers think twice about the serious consequences of their actions. As part of a settlement agreement between the authorities and the victim's family, the government provided compensation for her death, which prevented a lawsuit from being filed by her relatives. The amount of compensation remains undisclosed due to confidentiality agreements. It's worth noting that some people even blamed the victim for her own death because of her profession. Galassi was initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder after it was revealed that he had planned the crime in advance and purchased the knife beforehand. Galassi admitted his guilt, confessing that he had deliberately planned the murder. During his trial in February 2020, the prosecutor argued that Galassi's motivation for the crime was jealousy, resulting from his realization that Marilene was using him for financial gain. On February 27, 2020, the 51-year-old Eustachio Galassi was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. This time, he will be eligible to apply for parole, but not until he has served 25 years, unlike the 15-year requirement following the murder of his wife. Do you think Galassi will be released again if he lives to be 76 years old? Share your thoughts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Christine Marie Paulia. Once a bright and promising student, Christine became embroiled in a web of tragedy and despair. Her story serves as a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of unaddressed mental health challenges, peer pressure, and the devastating impact of unresolved trauma. Christine Marie Paulia was born on March 31, 1986, on the peaceful shores of Long Island, New York. She was the second child of Laurie and Charles, with her father working as a construction worker and her mother tending to the home. During her early years, Christine was known to be a lively and sociable child, though she could also be shy at times. She shared a close and affectionate relationship with her doting father. Tragically, Christine's life was shattered when her father met an untimely demise in a construction accident, crushed by falling bricks. The sorrow continued to engulf her as she lost her grandfather and great-grandmother soon after. Bereft of her father's comforting presence, Christine's family struggled with grief. Her mother, Laurie, grappling with the weight of her husband's death, found solace in drugs, spiraling into addiction. Unable to provide a stable environment, Laurie lost custody of Christine and her older brother, who found refuge in the care of their grandparents. During her early school years, Christine was diagnosed with alopecia, a condition that caused her to lose her hair, eyebrows, and eyelashes. Each morning, she would find clumps of her hair scattered across her pillow, resulting in bald patches and eventually affecting her eyesight, leading to the loss of her eyebrows and eyelashes. Additionally, she also had poor vision, which required her to wear thick eyeglasses from kindergarten through middle school. Christine endured persistent taunts and bullying from her peers, a relentless assault that severely undermined her self-esteem. Isolated and despondent, she grappled with loneliness and depression, Deprived of the companionship of friends to share her trials and triumphs, her classmates struggled to understand the cause of her thinning hair, leading to persistent teasing and mocking. Despite her attempts to conceal the loss with wigs, often described as bulky and reminiscent of Halloween costumes, she found no respite from the ridicule, further adding to her distress. Her drawn-on eyebrows also drew attention, fueling the mockery she faced, even with the wigs. Her torment persisted, escalating to the point where other children would brazenly remove them. Each morning brought a sense of dread, as Christine faced the uncertainty of which classmate would inflict pain upon her that day, deepening her anguish and resentment towards school. After reuniting with her mother, who had overcome her addiction and remarried, Christine and her family left Long Island behind and relocated to Clear Lake City, Texas, a suburb of Houston. This new environment offered a fresh start for Christine and her siblings. Living in a predominantly upper-middle-class neighborhood and enrolling in Clear Lake High School, Christine prepared herself for the possibility of continued bullying, but fate had other plans. In a turn of events, Christine crossed paths with Rachel Carutis and Tiffany Rowell, two popular girls who welcomed her with open arms and extended their friendship to her. Embracing this opportunity, they took Christine under their wing and initiated a remarkable transformation. With their guidance, Christine underwent a physical makeover, learning how to dress and apply makeup while also acquiring more stylish wigs. This outward change mirrored a profound inner shift as Christine blossomed into a more confident, outgoing, and content individual. With Rachel and Tiffany by her side, Christine effortlessly became part of the social scene at her high school, where she was embraced and admired by her classmates. Her transformed demeanor, brimming with confidence and charm, led to her being crowned Miss Irresistible in 2003, marking a poignant milestone in her journey of self-exploration and personal growth. Rachel and Tiffany exemplified social grace, effortlessly navigating popularity while remaining genuinely kind and inclusive. Rachel, with her flowing locks and captivating smile, exuded intelligence and charisma, considering a future in the United States Air Force alongside her passion for art and childcare. Tiffany, adorned with her radiant smile and boundless generosity, harbored dreams of a career in social work, complemented by her talents as an actress and her vast circle of friends, including her closest confidant, Rachel. Although a year ahead in school, they welcomed Christine into their fold, fostering a deep bond of friendship together. The trio reveled in laughter and camaraderie, with Christine finding solace in their company to the extent of shedding her wig, a symbol of her newfound comfort and happiness, as observed by her delighted mother in the summer of 2003. Rachel and Tiffany, at the age of 18, began a new chapter by moving in together. Meanwhile, Christine, who was 17 years old, remained in her final year of high school and frequently visited the pair. It was during this time that Christine started a relationship with Christopher Lee Snyder, a 21-year-old man. However, Christine's mother, stepfather, as well as Rachel and Tiffany, disapproved of the relationship. Their concerns were rooted in Christopher's history of drug abuse and his extensive criminal record, which included armed robbery. Despite the warnings from her loved ones, Christine continued the relationship, leading them to express their belief that she deserved better. Eventually, Christine found herself treading the same path as her boyfriend, succumbing to the allure of various drugs alongside Christopher. Christine's mother would later describe their relationship as toxic, revealing that Christopher not only isolated her daughter from loved ones, but also subjected her to alleged sexual assault. The couple's dynamic was plagued by intense jealousy, leading to frequent and heated conflicts. One particularly humiliating incident occurred when Christopher brazenly appeared at Christine's school, forcibly removing her wig in a deliberate attempt to shame her in front of classmates. Battling deep-seated insecurities and an unquenchable need for Christopher's attention, Christine became possessively jealous whenever he interacted with other girls. Christopher's family, recognizing the doomed nature of their relationship, pointed to the relentless arguments that plagued the couple. One such dispute escalated to the point where Christine spent an entire night on Christopher's front lawn, issuing threats of violence against his family. The police were frequently called to intervene in Christine's tumultuous relationship, and Christopher allegedly confided in his loved ones that he was truly frightened by only two things: the authorities and Christine herself. Despite the countless fights and clashes, Christine adamantly refused to sever ties with Christopher, a decision that would ultimately lead to devastating consequences. On the afternoon of July 18, 2003, Christopher and Christine visited Tiffany's home with the intention of stealing drugs and money. Tiffany was present with her boyfriend, Marcus Priscilla, his cousin, Adalbert Sanchez, and Tiffany's friend, Rachel. Allegedly, Marcus and his cousin were involved in drug dealing, leading Christopher and Christine to believe that drugs were stored in Tiffany's home. They planned to rob these drugs, and an argument between Christopher and Marcus ensued, resulting in the shooting of all four individuals in the home. Tiffany and Rachel sustained multiple gunshot wounds, including shots to the crotch, indicating a motive of sexual aggravation and jealousy. Adalbert Sanchez, Marcus's cousin, had recently moved to Clear Lake to escape violence, only to be killed in the tragedy shortly after his arrival. Rachel, critically wounded, tried to call for help but was suddenly found by Christine. In a shocking turn of events, Christine repeatedly hit Rachel on the head with the butt of her .38 caliber revolver until Rachel stopped moving. Christine later confessed to the police that Rachel had begged for her life, but Christine had chosen to kill her anyway. Less than an hour after he committed the murders, Christopher drove Christine to her job at Walgreens, where she worked at the makeup counter, and she acted as if nothing had happened. At around 6 p.m., a friend of Tiffany's, who was 18 years old, came to her house to join the group. When she got no response to her knocks, she noticed that Tiffany's and Marcus's vehicles were still parked outside. She became worried, entered the unlocked door, and was met with a horrific scene. Her friends were dead. She immediately fled the scene and called the police. The police characterized the crime scene as excessively brutal, earning the label overkill, due to its horrific nature, initially suspecting it to be linked to drug trafficking. The victims, Tiffany and Rachel, had recently graduated and worked at a strip club, while Marcus was involved in selling cocaine. As a result, the police initially presumed that the crime was orchestrated by professionals connected to the drug trade, given that all the victims, except for Rachel, were killed in a manner consistent with execution-style murders. After the murders, the police launched an investigation, using descriptions of the suspects given by neighbors who had seen them walking to and from the home. The timeline of events showed that the murders took place around 3:25 p.m. Notably, Christine had already clocked into her job before 4 p.m. that same day. Although Christine appeared distressed in front of her family when the murders were announced, she supposedly didn't attend the victim's funeral due to depression. Christine took a significant step towards reforming her life by checking herself into rehab to overcome her drug addiction. Around the same time, Christopher was arrested in Kentucky and put behind bars for unrelated car theft charges, which ultimately led to the demise of their relationship. Nevertheless, the Clear Lake massacre remained a mystery, unsolved, for 3 long years, despite concerted efforts to crack the case. In 2004, Christine checked herself into a rehab center in Ville, Texas, to overcome her addiction to drugs. It was there that she met Stanley Justin Rott, and a romance developed between them. After completing their treatment programs in 2005, they got married, vowing to stay drug-free together. They used the $360,000 trust fund left by Christine's biological father to start their new life, investing in an apartment. Christine's family had concerns about her marriage, particularly given Stanley's past of allegedly taking advantage of women financially. Christine and Stanley had made a conscious effort to stay away from drugs, but their happiness was short-lived. As the second anniversary of the murders approached in July 2005, the media's renewed focus on the case brought back painful memories for Christine. Rather than mourning the loss of her loved ones, she became increasingly upset by the released suspect sketches. This distress led her to confide in Stanley about her role in the murders, causing the couple to go into hiding in November 2005. Christine and Stanley were living in a San Antonio motel room where they spent the following 8 months regularly using heroin and cocaine. On July 8, 2006, the police received an anonymous tip about the murders. The informant claimed to have been in rehab with Christine and overheard her confessing her involvement in the crime to Stanley. Acting on this information, the police located Christine on July 19, 2006, and placed her under arrest. Stanley was also apprehended after the authorities discovered 70 vials of heroin in their room. While in custody, Stanley disclosed a startling revelation to the police. He alleged that Christine had confessed to him that after the shooting, she encountered Rachel, who was still alive, and proceeded to kill her friend by beating her to death. Christine tried to shift the blame to her ex-boyfriend Christopher during her questioning by the detectives, saying he came up with the plan to rob her friends, which went wrong. She told the police that all she wanted was to get drugs and money and didn't mean to hurt anyone. According to Christine, a fight broke out between Christopher and one of the men there, and shots were fired. She claimed Christopher forced her to pull the trigger by putting his hand over hers. The story that was told about the event was proven to be false by the coroner's reports, which showed that 2 different guns were used. Additionally, Christine admitted to going back to the scene to make sure the victims were dead, and she described a disturbing encounter with her friend Rachel, whom she claimed to have hit multiple times with a gun while Rachel was trying to call for help. Despite possessing this knowledge, Christine's defense attorneys maintained that she had never wielded a firearm and harbored no intention of causing harm. Meanwhile, Christopher, the other perpetrator in the crime, was released from jail. However, upon police entering his residence, they discovered that he had vanished without a trace, even before law enforcement arrived. Reportedly, he had become aware of the warrant for his arrest and the impending capital charges against him. Christopher had apparently moved to South Carolina and started dating a woman he met online. After finding out about the arrest warrant, he allegedly brought back pills and soda from South Carolina. Sadly, his body was later found lifeless in a nearby wooded area, and medical examiners confirmed that the cause of death was an overdose of pills. Inside the safe, police found 2 guns that were later matched to the murders. Christine's husband, Stanley, told the authorities that she had admitted to being involved in the murders, and he agreed to testify against her. His testimony was later confirmed to be true. Christine has never expressed remorse for the killings, nor provided any motive. However, psychiatrist Gail Saltz theorizes that her actions stemmed from envy and jealousy toward her more popular friends. Christopher's sister, Brandy, concurs that jealousy was likely the driving force behind the murders, reflecting on Christine's demeanor and remarking, "I remember her being intensely jealous." There must have been some underlying jealousy between Christine and Rachel. Christine was found guilty of 4 counts of capital murder on October 13, 2008. Despite being a juvenile offender at the time of the crimes, she was spared the death penalty and received a life sentence in prison. Despite filing multiple appeals regarding her sentence, all have been rejected. Christine is currently serving her sentence at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas, and is scheduled for parole eligibility in July 2046 at the age of 60. Christine's downward spiral had devastating consequences, resulting in the loss of innocent lives and leaving the community stunned and grief-stricken. As the community came to terms with the tragedy, they rallied together to pay their respects to those who were taken too soon, and to offer each other comfort and support in the face of unbearable sorrow. The tragic outcome of Christine's story serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need to prioritize mental health awareness and to provide timely support and intervention to individuals grappling with trauma and mental health problems. Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, let's listen to the case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela. Her mother, Andrina Bermudos Millian, hailed from Maturin, Monagas. Her father, Leonardo Salazar, came from Tucupita, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. A year after Paula's birth, in September 2016, the couple decided to immigrate with their child to Ecuador. They were seeking better opportunities for themselves and their daughter. Shortly after relocating to Quito, the capital of Ecuador, the family dynamic began to deteriorate due to various reasons. Andrina made the decision to separate from Leonardo and moved with Paula to Cuenca, Ecuador's third largest city. In Cuenca lived the mother of Andrina's best friend. She kindly offered them lodging while they sought a new place and means of employment. Meanwhile, given the circumstances and breakup, Leonardo decided to return to Venezuela. He eventually emigrated again, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had long been disabled. An accident during his youth had left his left arm entirely incapacitated. This disability made securing stable employment challenging even in Quito. Following her move to Cuenca, Andrina almost cut off communication with Leonardo completely. She informed him just once that she had secured work on a farm in Tabacundo. A few months after parting ways with Leonardo, Andrina entered into a new relationship with Washington Andreas Aymaro, a local Ecuadorian and owner of the farm where she worked. Washington came from a wealthy family. When Paula reached about 18 months old, Andrina moved in with Washington, along with Paula. On April 7, 2019, Andrina and Washington welcomed a child together. This marked a period of happiness and unity for the family. However, everything changed dramatically on March 27, 2020. An event occurred that profoundly impacted all involved parties' lives. During that period, the family was living well, enjoying each day on the farm, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. One day, Andreas decided to take to the flower plantations by car. However, en route, the girl became very ill. She felt dizzy and began to vomit. Left with no choice, Andreas stopped at a public restroom. As soon as they entered the restroom, Paula vomited again. Andreas decided to leave her alone for a few minutes while he went back to the car to retrieve a change of clothes since hers were dirty. Upon his return, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He immediately pulled her out and attempted first aid before rushing her to the hospital. When the 4-year-old was handed over to medical professionals, she showed no signs of life. Doctors declared Paula deceased after performing an initial examination. They quickly noticed inconsistencies in Andreas's story. For instance, they observed bruises on her body and face that did not match his account. Medical protocols require doctors to notify police in such situations, which they did right away. Police arrived shortly thereafter and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's death. Although he claimed she had drowned in the toilet bowl, the autopsy revealed a more troubling reality. Tests showed that Paula had been dead for approximately 24 hours when she arrived at the hospital. This contradicted Andreas's timeline of events. He stated that he had given her first aid and cardiopulmonary resuscitation just 20 minutes before taking her there. Moreover, the autopsy uncovered severe injuries, several broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, all contributing factors to her death. It became clear that Paula's death was not an accident. Her small body bore numerous recent and old injuries. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, learned of her death on March 33, days after the events transpired. His mother, who remained in Venezuela, informed him via phone. She had learned about it through a friend of Andreina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andreina began a new relationship and ceased all communication with him. Consequently, for 3 days, Leonardo was unaware of the tragedy. During that time, he could only see Paula through pictures sent by Andreina and their mutual friends. Additionally, Andreina blocked Leonardo on all social media platforms, preventing any form of communication with Paula. She also cut off contact with almost all of Leonardo's relatives. It is worth noting that she turned most of their mutual friends against Leonardo by portraying him as disinterested in maintaining a relationship with Paula. Despite these challenges, Leonardo was determined to learn about his daughter's death. However, Andreina's family provided an alternative explanation for her passing. At that time, Ecuador, like much of the world, was under quarantine due to the pandemic. Understandably skeptical about this claim, Leonardo began researching virus-related deaths in the country through social media and news sites. He quickly found no children among the few victims. With the assistance of his relatives, Leonardo continued his investigation. One relative sent him a newspaper article reporting the arrest of Andreina on suspicion of killing Paula. Persistently seeking answers, he called Andreina daily until she finally returned his call 10 days later. Because her lawyers had forbidden her to, the next step Leonardo took was to create a Facebook page with an acquaintance of his. This page was dedicated to Paula. They also set up an Instagram profile called Justice for Paula. The posts they published caused a huge backlash across social media, the main goal to bring those responsible for his daughter's death to justice. On the same day that Andreina called Leonardo, she arrived at the morgue to begin arranging her daughter's funeral. Even though the prosecutor working on the case asked for more time to investigate the body, Paula's funeral still took place on April 10, 2020. Andreina did not allow a second autopsy to be performed on Paula. Thanks to information posted on social media and shared by Andreina's friends, people in her circle contacted Leonardo and told him about Paula's sad life before her death. They sent Leonardo various pieces of information they had collected, most of which were isolated recordings of conversations, photos, audio clips, and similar items. According to witnesses, ever since Paula's mother moved in with Andreas, Paula had endured abuse from both her stepfather and her own mother. Not only did Andrea allow her daughter to be treated this way, but she herself was directly involved in it. Everyone noted that Paula seemed happy and cheerful only when she was playing alone. In the presence of her stepfather, she appeared depressed, acted shy, and became suddenly very fearful. At one point, the little girl told people she trusted that her mother and stepfather would beat her if she misbehaved. One day she even confessed that as punishment, Andreas pushed her into a wall where she hit her head. Paula referred to her stepfather as nothing less than a monster, and was undoubtedly very afraid of him. She constantly had nightmares and suffered from insomnia at a young age. The couple initially preferred that the girl, who was 2 years old at the time they moved into the stepfather's home, sleep alone when falling asleep. Paula often cried, but no one paid any attention to her. Additionally, her mother and stepfather forced her to manage on her own without assistance. Moreover, her mother Andreina had been teaching her how to cook since she was 2 years old, which seemed unreasonable. Paula was compelled to prepare her own breakfast and dinners because her mother preferred to sleep in the mornings and take a break from caregiving in the evenings. She simply did not want to care for her daughter. Andreina did not mind that Paula had to handle the oven by herself, despite the inherent dangers. At preschool, where Andreina had enrolled Paula, the girl frequently complained of pain in her legs and back, and often mentioned she could not walk. Her constant complaints, along with the bruises on her body, prompted the teacher to show her to doctors at a health center. After an examination, they concluded that Paula was being mistreated at home. The teachers then called a special police organization to investigate the abuse within Paula's family. Officials took up the case and decided to send Paula somewhere safe while they conducted their investigation. Consequently, on October 16, 2019, Paula was temporarily transferred to her uncle's care, Andreina's brother. A hearing on the matter was set for December 4, 2019. Unfortunately, the teachers who were supposed to testify never appeared for reasons unknown. As a result, they scheduled a retrial for February 27, 2020. However, once again, all the teachers failed to attend. Consequently, the court had no option but to dismiss all charges against Paula's parents and return her to her mother. 1 month later, on March 27th, Paula passed away. The exact reasons why the teachers chose not to attend either hearing remain unknown. It is speculated that Andreina might have bribed or persuaded them that although Paula had some issues, it wasn't due to any wrongdoing by her parents. After Paula's tragic death, Andreas was placed in protective custody during the investigation. Soon appealed this decision, resulting in a hearing on June 12, 2020. At the hearing, which was held via video conference, the judge set an order and determined Andreas could be released to house arrest. However, during the hearing, Andreas announced that he was withdrawing his appeal. At that time, Leonardo was still conducting a social media campaign and asked his subscribers for financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador. His goal was to file a complaint against Andreina, Paula's mother, before it became too late. Andreina had not yet been charged and remained free. Fortunately, Leonardo managed to secure sufficient financial aid as well as free legal advice from 2 Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. They generously offered him support and assistance with the lawsuit. Leonardo faced significant challenges to reach Ecuador. He had to cross the border between Trinidad and Venezuela by rafting across dangerous waters and then travel across rugged terrain. Due to the pandemic, all regular maritime and land borders of Venezuela were closed. Thus, only a few flights were available to a handful of countries. Once Leonardo arrived in Táchira State, he crossed into Colombia over hazardous terrain. From there, he took a bus to Ipiales and continued onward through hills and plains until reaching Rumichaca Bridge, the border between Colombia and Ecuador. Upon crossing into Ecuador, Leonardo took a cab to Quito. On June 30th, he immediately met with a lawyer upon arrival. The bereaved father filed a complaint against his ex-girlfriend, so she would also be considered a suspect in Paula's murder. By July 6, 2020, an indictment was issued against Andreina. She appeared in court, where it was decided that house arrest would suffice instead of full custody. In November 2020, the initial hearing for the case took place. Although a specific trial date had not yet been determined at that time, participation and discussions were intense. Leonardo's attorney voiced concerns about Andreina's potential escape risk, as she had previously attempted suicide using pills. The lawyer requested that Andreina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. The judge granted this request, and also reduced her required court appearances to once a week instead of twice. However, shortly after, Andreina requested a reconsideration regarding the necessity of wearing the electronic bracelet. Consequently, another hearing was held on November 16th to review this decision. These developments inevitably caused delays in the trial proceedings, but eventually the judge set a new date for December. Despite limited media coverage of Andreas and Andreina's trial, much information found its way onto social media platforms. However, due to the pandemic dominating news coverage at the time, some details remained unreported. The trial began on January 14, 2021. At that point, no final decision had been made regarding Andreina's alternative imprisonment options, while Andreas remained detained at the regional detention center. The trial was conducted behind closed doors, with no media representatives present. Some participants attended via video link to ensure proceedings continued smoothly despite restrictions. According to testimony from the doctor who performed Paula's autopsy, several disturbing findings were made. Nearly all of her spinal discs had been rebuilt. She suffered broken ribs, some of which had fused naturally over time, and she displayed symptoms like nail stigmata, where nails grow into the skin, as well as bruises and scratches on her face and body. Furthermore, there was fluid accumulation in her lungs and serious injuries, such as scars on her head and lacerations on her colon. These medical findings suggested prolonged physical trauma before Paula's death and became critical evidence in understanding what transpired during her final days. The later injuries were what caused the infection to develop into sepsis, ultimately leading to death. The autopsy report confirmed that by the time took Paula to the hospital, she had been deceased for approximately 24 hours. The extent of her internal and external injuries revealed the severity of cruelty she had endured, as well as the negligence of her guardians, who never once sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was malnourished, underweight, and too small for her age, with clear mineral and nutritional deficiencies. Regarding Paula's injuries, her mother Andreina tried to persuade family and friends that Paula had numerous psychological problems. She asserted that these issues led to self-harm behaviors, which were attempts by Paula to attract attention. According to Andreina, when Paula's younger brother was born, Paula began lacking parental attention, stopped sleeping at night, and attempted to manipulate everyone through crying. In October 2019, even though Paula was supposed to stay with her uncle per a board's decision, she actually continued staying at her parents' house most of the time, and only slept at her uncle's house occasionally. This indicates that measures taken by authorities did not achieve their intended outcomes. Furthermore, it was established that in 2017, shortly after Leonardo's departure from Ecuador, Paula began experiencing abuse, likely starting right after Andreina entered into a relationship with Andreas. At the trial attended by over 40 witnesses from the accusing party, it was confirmed that Paula endured abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final hearing before the judge delivered the verdict, Andreina claimed full responsibility for the child's abuse. She admitted to beating Paula with a belt and sometimes using her fists. Through this statement, Andreina attempted to deflect blame away from her partner Andreas. She stated emphatically that he was innocent, that he had no involvement in the matter, and that he had never mistreated Paula. Andreina also mentioned that she had reprimanded her daughter for causing issues with her new husband. Breaking up with him meant returning to the streets and losing the financial stability she could only gain through his support. Taking care of her daughter was not her main concern. Upon reviewing Paula's circumstances, the judges expressed concern for the couple's newborn son. However, they noted that this child, unlike Paula, was never abused. It is worth mentioning that Andreas opted to exercise his right to remain silent and has not commented on the incident since his arrest on February 3, 2021. Paula's trial concluded with both defendants being found guilty of murdering the girl. The maximum penalty for this crime is 13 years. Leonardo's original attorneys and the prosecution sought the maximum punishment for the perpetrators. However, considering an aggravating factor that Paula was just 4 years old and unable to defend herself, the chief judge sentenced Andreina and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. According to Ecuadorian law, convicted individuals have 3 days to appeal a verdict. The couple, as anticipated, indicated their intention to do so immediately. Despite being sentenced to 17 years and 4 months in prison, Andre remained under house arrest instead of being jailed directly. She utilized her opportunity to appeal, necessitating higher court confirmation of her incarceration sentence. Meanwhile, she continues to follow the previously imposed measures. This situation is markedly different from Andreas' case. He was detained upon his appearance at the hospital with a deceased girl. Public outrage has been palpable over Andreina remaining at large. Of particular note is Leonardo's anger and concern over her potentially evading justice.
Corpus Christi resident Kevin Davis strangled his mother before hitting her in the head with a hammer, splitting her skull. Davis then swirled her brain around before sexually assaulting her corpse. Davis was sentenced to life in prison for the crime of a mom who he described as the bast. In 2014, Kevin Jazreel Davis argued with his mother, 50-year-old Kimberly Hill, in the Corpus Christi, TX, apartment he shared with her and his sister, Destiny. On May 26th, Davis called 911, reporting that he'd just murdered his mother. Once at the police station, then 18-year-old Davis vividly detailed the day's events, sometimes with a smirk on his face. What he told detectives was gruesome and shocking. Kevin admitted bashing in Hill's head with a hammer,
swirling her brain around, and then sexually assaulting her corpse. On the morning of March 27, 2014, Davis, bored and frustrated with life, told his mother he did not like people and that he wanted to commit suicide. Obviously caught off guard by the statement, Hill allegedly told her son that she could not stop him, that was what he wanted to do. Kevin later told police hearing this from his mother enraged him. It was then he decided to take her life. As Hill sat on the couch in the living room, Davis came up behind her, attempting to strangle her with a cord. Hill began screaming. Kevin panicked, retrieved a hammer, and began bashing in his mother's skull. Davis struck his mother in the head with the hammer at least 20 times, splitting her skull in the process. Davis then retrieved a kitchen knife that he inserted inside his mother's head wound. He swirled her brain around to make sure she was dead, Kevin claimed, and then inserted his hand inside the wound. He would tell detectives during a taped interrogation that his mother's brain felt like putty. Kevin then dragged his mother's lifeless body to her bedroom and raped her corpse. When he finished the sadistic act, he went to a neighbor's house, saying he just killed someone and needed help. The neighbor dialed 911. Police arrested Davis without incident. At the police station, he made a full confession of the crime, giving details that even seasoned detectives found highly disturbing. Watch part of Kevin Davis's confession. During the interrogation, Davis told detectives that he originally planned on killing his sister, too, but changed his mind. He further admitted that he often fantasized about having sex with dead bodies. With a smirk on his face, Kevin also told the detective that he was a virgin before he raped his mother. He stated, "I guess I've lost my virginity to a corpse," as he gently laughed. What did Kimberly Hill do to warrant such a violent death? Nothing warrants a son murdering and sexually assaulting his mother, of course, and Kevin could not give detectives one good reason for the crime. According to Kevin, she was a great mom that did not deserve what he had done to her. He said that she was the best mother in the world, and went on to say, "I am a terrible, disgusting person." Kevin admitted that he had the best mother in the world, telling detectives that she did nothing to deserve what was done to her. He went on to say that he was a terrible, disgusting person. In reality, Kevin was a serial killer in the making, a psychopath who took sadistic pleasure in hurting other people. Although diagnosed by a psychologist with antisocial personality disorder, the doctor said he knew right from wrong when he brutally murdered and raped his mother. He readily admitted that he would kill again if ever released from prison. He also confessed to then fleeing the crime scene on his bicycle. Before he did that, though, he left several handwritten notes for the police, one of which read, "Chase me. Sorry for the mess. KD." But after a while, he decided against leaving town and called 911 to report his mother's killing and his crimes. Despite admitting to the murder and making a videotaped confession, Kevin Davis pleaded not guilty to the charges in court. He later changed the plea. Davis smiled at the jury as they sentenced him to life in prison. He serves his time at the Jester 4 facility in Richmond, Texas, and is eligible for parole in March 2044. Story number 2. Story of the Killer Priest. We will be exploring the story of a killer, a priest that seemed to be normal, nothing strange or nothing weird about him. However, he did have a dark side. It turns out that not only was he a pervert, but he was manipulating people as he saw fit, especially women. And now, without further ado, let's dive into the story of gore. We're going back in time in the 50s in France. And we need to take note that the church at that time had a very important place in people's lives. Especially in the countryside, the priests were almost as important as the mayors because they were representing a type of moral authority that many people listened to. And this was the case in the small village of Europe where this story took place. A town that had about 400 villagers, Gore was born on the countryside, and his family was very Catholic. They raised him so that he can have a career in religion as a priest, and even if that was not his first choice, that is exactly what he became.
It is in 1950 that Guy became a priest at the Church of Europe. In appearance, this young man looked like the ideal priest. He was nice, friendly, kind, and very dynamic. Anything linked to religion, he did it very, very well. He had a lot of great ideas to help the village grow. He created a choir, a group to play in a theater piece. He did organize multiple excursions for the kids, and he was known to have created a soccer team for the boys of the village. The older people thought that it was very modern for him to bring all these items to the village, and the younger generation thought it was pretty amazing and appreciated the modern aspect that he brought to the town and to the religion. Dewar was apparently also a beautiful man, and the ladies found him very charming. Now, as I have mentioned at the beginning, underneath this whole angelic disguise guy was actually hiding a dark secret. His personality, he had a thirst for colel pleasure, and he was using his charm to get closer to the ladies. After a lot of perversity and manipulation, a lot of the women actually gave in, and none of the women spoke as they were afraid that no one would believe them and did not want to be seen as the shame of the village. It is in 1953 that things took a different turn for Guy Dyer, and an incident happened that changed the plan of the priest. A girl fell for his charm, and guess what happened? She became pregnant. Now, of course, the priest denies everything, and he says that he is not the father. He threatens the girl and says that if she does not stop, he will file a complaint for defamation. Now, having a high influence in the village, Guy says that this is nonsense, and it is impossible for him to be the father. And of course, having such an high influence, his followers believed him. He was even summoned in front of his superior, the bishop, to which he lied to you and denied the whole thing. And of course, this whole situation was shut down in reality. He was actually the father, and he actually took the girl to another village to give birth, where he convinced her to give away the child. And of course, that story was never heard of or told to the villagers, or we could say maybe presume that if people knew, they decided not to say anything, because the priests had such a high influence on the villagers that they did not want to go against him. Once the story died, Guy went back to his normal ways and kept manipulating the people like he did before. But there was another incident in 1956. Reen Faze, 19 years of age, got pregnant, and again by Guy Dyer. Contrary to the other women, Reen did not want to give away her child for adoption. Not only that, but she wanted to raise him in the village of the Uref, where the priest was terrified, and he was afraid that eventually the child would grow up and resemble him. He was also afraid that this woman would actually speak. Eventually, speaking of which, in 1956, rumors started to make surface. A lot of parishioners were becoming pregnant in mysterious ways, and no one knew who the father was. The priest then starts to think about a plan and ask a military man from another village to come to town and pretend that he was the father. Unfortunately, that strategy did not work out, and no one believed the soldier was the father. That only made things worse for the mysterious pregnancies. December 3rd, 1956 is a date that changed everything, for the priest Kai brings Rain in on a deserted road to try and convince her one more time to give up the child. She refuses again, and she was tired of the priest's request. So you know what she did. She got out of the car and started to walk back the opposite way back to the village. At night, Guy Dyer got out of the car and pulled out a 6.35 caliber pistol and fired 3 shots. The 3 shot hit Regine in the back of the neck, and she died on the spot. Once the crime committed, the priest walked to the victim, undressed her, and took out a knife and started to open Regine's stomach. From her stomach, he removed the baby girl that was still alive. The priest committed again an act that cannot be forgiven. He strangled the baby, stabbed it, disfigured it, and he did all the thinking to himself that, if the baby is massacred that way, there would be no DNA, if you want to call it that way, no DNA to trace the baby back to him. The disappearance of Regine was actually reported in the evening, and the weird part is that the priest joined the search party to find Regine. Can you imagine that situation? I mean, the killer is with you in the search party trying to find the person that he just murdered. Is it just me, or that is just like Twisted? The body was found very quickly, and because the priest was not an assassin, he didn't, Think about cleaning up the crime scene so it didn't take long for the cops to find the murder weapon, and they found the weapon casing that linked back to the priest. So the priest is now a suspect, and when asked during the interrogation, the priest denied everything. However, because of all the pressure he was getting, he just cracked and admitted everything. Now that story came out and everyone was devastated in France because he is now a criminal, and the church asked for Guy to be locked up with a false name so that it would not affect the church, and also the main reason was to make sure that the crime was not associated to the church. The court addressed the case of Guy Desnoyers on January 24, 1958. Of course, the villagers and the public opinion wanted the priest to be sentenced to death. The life of Guy was defined as a person that did enjoy luxury, sexual relations, and admired his own authority, and on his side, the priest was asking forgiveness because he had no clue what he did wrong. The jury did provide their verdict, and for most, they said that he was guilty of double murder. Of course, there was Regine and the baby. However, they did not want to sentence him to death. The jury did not want to send someone associated to the church to the scaffold. The priest Guy Desnoyers was therefore sentenced to perpetrated work. Now that situation raised a lot of questions regarding the responsibility of the Catholic Church, and this is still a question that is being asked nowadays, especially for the priests who like other kids, if you know what I mean. There was an investigation that was done, and the report came up saying that the church knew the dark side that he was hiding before he was pronounced priest. His superiors noticed that he did not have a lot of faith, and he was not really a believer in Catholic religion. The investigation did show that before being priest in Europe, he was sent to Plymouth. While he was there, he did have a sexual relation with his parishioner, and instead of removing his status, they just transferred him to another city. Even there, his weakness for women did not stop, as he did have multiple sexual relations. You would think that the church would revoke his status, but instead he was just transferred to Europe, where the church was isolated and his temptations might be lower. But as we have seen, this was not the case. Desnoyers was released in 1972 after being detained for 22 years. He was the oldest prisoner of France. Once again, the church came to his help after he was released from prison. He was welcome in a monastery in Brittany, where he stayed there until he died on April 21, 2010 at 90 years of age. Now we go to story number 3. Family slaughtered at Wellsgrave Provincial Park. The killer stalked the family while he let his violent fantasies run wild. 3 generations of a family left to go camping on August 2, 1982. They set up camp in the Wellsgrave Provincial Park, located roughly 120 kilometers north of Kamloops in central British Columbia. They enjoyed several days of cloudy family time, picking berries during the day and gathering around the fire at night, having no idea that they were being stalked by a killer. Among the campers was grandparents Edith, 59, and George Bentley, aged 66. Their daughter Jackie, 41, and son-in-law Bob Johnson, 44. Also the Johnsons' daughters Janet, 13, and Karen, just 11. The Johnsons drove up with their daughters and pitched a tent for the girls. The grandparents brought a truck and camper where the adults would stay. The last anyone heard from the family was on August 6th, when Edith called another daughter. It would not be until August 23rd that the family would first be reported missing. Bob Johnson was due back at work on August 16th, but didn't show. After a week with no word from him, his company filed a missing persons case with the police. In spite of an extensive search, it didn't result in finding any of the family members. The biggest problems were the killer had a head start. With plenty of time to kill, get rid of the victims' bodies, and cover his tracks. The other, maybe even bigger obstacle was, no one knew exactly where the family was camping at. All anyone knew was that the family was camping in the Wellsgrave area, which is massive. They had no idea where to even start, let alone being able to follow a trail to find the family. It would take 3 more weeks and a mushroom picker to find the family. On September 13th, the current discovery of the Johnsons' 1979 Plymouth was found. It had been burned beyond recognition as it set off to the side of a mountainside logging road. The car held the bodies of the 4 adults in the back seat and the 2 young girls in the trunk. The bodies were burned so thoroughly that when it came time to bury the family, They were all placed together in one child-sized casket. Through a forensic examination of the remains, it was determined they had been shot with a .22 caliber firearm. Locals were able to tell investigators where they had seen the family camped at. An examination of the area would turn up .22 casings, which helped identify the weapon used as a Remington pump-action rifle. What wasn't at the campsite was the truck and camper, the boat, and camping gear brought with the family, or any trace of the family at all. With no suspect in custody or even in sight, the media was pushing for answers. A tip came in that the family's truck and camper had been spotted. The witnesses said it was being driven by 2 French Canadians in central Canada. The media sprang into action, throwing this up as their headline and demanding the killers to be caught. In April, with still no leads, the investigators knew they needed to get creative. They reenacted what they believed was the crime scene for TV cameras and aired it across Canada. The next month, the police drove a replica Ford camper truck to Ontario and Quebec, in an attempt to draw awareness for what people should be looking out for. What it did instead was flood the investigators with over 13,000 tips and sightings of the replica vehicle. The reward was raised from $7,500 to $10,000 for information leading to the truck. None of the tips led to the discovery of the camper and truck. It would be found by sheer luck. 2 forestry employees were working on a logging road and stumbled across it. The camper had sat there on Trophy Mountain for 14 months, only a few kilometers away from the crime scene. The camper was burned out like the car holding the family's bodies. This left the authorities to believe they were looking for someone local to the Wells Gray area, and not 2 French Canadians as they had been searching for, since it was more likely that a local would know about the logging roads and the area in general. Taking a closer look at the person who lived closest to the crime scene led them back to David William Shearing, 24. They had received a tip about him earlier in the investigation. When they followed up, the tipster had quite a bit to tell them. A year earlier, Shearing had asked him about re-registering a Ford truck and how to repair a hole in its door. This was a tip that the police had never divulged. After finding the truck, it had a bullet hole in the door. After an interrogation by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Shearing confessed. He went so far as reenacting the murders for the detectives. He turned over evidence that he had stolen from the family and the murder weapon, the .22 caliber Remington rifle. The ballistic test would prove that this was the weapon used to kill the family. The same weapon that had been hanging on his wall the very first time the authorities went to ask him about the family, right after they had been reported missing. Maybe it was because his father was a prison guard or his brother was a sheriff. But Shearing wasn't suspected when first interviewed. In his confession, he gave details of how it all happened. He had first noticed the family when he set up camp, fixating on the 2 young girls. Then over the next few days, he watched their every move. On the night of August 10th, Shearing watched as the adults sat around the campfire and had seen the girls go into their tent for the night. From a distance, he took out the 4 adults with sniper shots. He said he then killed the 2 girls from their tent as they slept. After, he said he loaded all the bodies into the car and moved it to the logging road, then set it on fire with 5 gallons of gasoline. He then cleaned up the campground, removing the family's possessions, including the camper and truck. It would only be later that he burned these as he was unable to transfer them into his name. He claimed that he killed the family because he wanted to rob them of their possessions. It wouldn't be until after Shearing was convicted that he gave his full confession of how he had been stalking the family. It was the girls that he fantasized about having sex with that kept him interested. That's why after killing the adults, he kidnapped the girls and took them to his property nearby. There he raped and terrorized them for over a week. On August 16th, the day their father was due back at work, Shearing took Taryn away from her big sister. Once alone, he shot the girl in the back of the head. Janet would be left alive for one more day of torture before she would be killed like her sister. With the girls now dead, he took their bodies to the Johnsons' car where the other family members had been placed. He had actually only hidden the car in some bush. He put the girls in the trunk and got into the driver's seat with the 4 decomposing adult bodies in the back seat, driving it to its final resting place where it would be found by that mushroom pick for burned out. David Shearing pled guilty to 6 counts of murder. Shearing was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole for 25 years. The maximum penalty for second-degree murder. This would be the first time that this sentence was handed out in Canadian history. David Shearing, who changed his last name to his mother's maiden name of Ennis, was first eligible for parole in 2008. The National Parole Board ruled against his release, citing that he was still having violent sexual fantasies and had not completed a sex offender treatment program, so he was not ready to be released. Again in 2012, he was turned down for parole, applying again in 2014, but before his hearing, he withdrew his request. The National Parole Board has also been given a petition which has over 15,000 signatures, advocating for the violent offender to never be released. In his own words at one of his parole hearings, David tries to plead for freedom, saying this about himself: "I was very selfish." He is supported by his wife, that he married while in prison, Heather.